Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11th, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m. when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m. when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ingrid Lane. Ingrid, a devoted mother and healthcare professional, was searching for companionship and romance in the modern world of online dating. Unaware, her quest for love would lead to a chilling encounter that would culminate in unimaginable horror. Ingrid Marilyn Lane, born on August 2, 1975, lived in Renton, Washington, with her 3 young daughters, just outside Seattle. She worked as a nurse at the Swedish Medical Center in Seattle, while managing life as a divorced parent, having recently separated from Philip, the father of her children. Custody arrangements were made to share parenting duties between Ingrid and Philip. Ingrid was described as a petite woman with a vibrant personality. She was deeply devoted to her daughters, willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their safety and well-being. On April 9, 2016, Philip, Ingrid's former spouse, visited their residence in Renton, King County, Washington. Despite their divorce, Philip and Ingrid maintained a cordial relationship to effectively co-parent their 3 children. Noelle, 10 years old, Brooke, 8 years old, and Reese, 6 years old at the time. Ingrid knew that Philip planned to bring the girls back to their apartment in Renton after spending the night with them. When Philip arrived at the house around 10 a.m., He noticed that Ingrid's Toyota Highlander was not in its usual spot in front of the house. Although Ingrid was supposed to be off duty from her job as a nurse at Seattle's Swedish Medical Center, she was expecting her daughters to return to her care that day. Philip was confident that Ingrid would have been home to welcome them. After several failed attempts to reach Ingrid by phone, Philip contacted Ingrid's mother, Jorga. Together, they entered the house using the key Jorga had. While searching the house, Jorga found Ingrid's purse, phone, and other personal belongings, including her driver's license, but there was no sign of Ingrid herself. It seemed unlikely that she would have left without notifying anyone. Concerned, Jorga decided to contact the authorities and report that Ingrid was missing. As the investigation progressed, the authorities reached out to Ingrid's friends and neighbors, learning that she had mentioned going on a date the previous night to one of them. Additionally, a neighbor mentioned that Ingrid had recently started seeing a man. Jorga and Philip were unaware of Ingrid's romantic involvement, but they shared a phone account, allowing Ingrid to access Jorga's call logs. Upon inspecting the logs, Jorga noticed multiple calls to the same Montana-based number. Suspicious, Ingrid's sister conducted some online investigation and discovered that the number belonged to a Facebook account registered to a man named John Robert Charlton. Concerned about her daughter's well-being, Jorga reached out to the number via text on Saturday, informing the recipient that she had contacted 911 to seek information about her daughter's whereabouts. John Charlton responded to Jorga's text with surprise, asking, "911, what's happening?" He then explained that he and Ingrid had attended a Mariners game the previous day, but did not spend the night together, as Ingrid needed to be up early to tend to her children. Despite Jorga's insistence that he speak to the police, John did not respond further. On April 9th, a resident named Mike Novasio, who lives in the Seattle area, made a call to the authorities. When he returned home, he noticed an unusual weight in one of his recycling bins, which he had left outside for collection, scheduled for April 7th. Sensing that something was wrong, he decided to investigate further. Upon opening the bin, he was shocked to find 3 translucent plastic bags, one of which contained what appeared to be human remains. Alarmed, he promptly notified the authorities. Upon their arrival, the police and medical examiner carefully examined the contents of the bags. Inside, they discovered a human head, a foot, an arm with a hand, and a lower leg. Despite the absence of decomposition, the facial features were still discernible, allowing for the identification of the remains as belonging to Ingrid Line. In the following days, additional fragments of Ingrid's remains were found. Some were discovered at a recycling facility, while others were located in a cooler at a different site. Unfortunately, not all of Ingrid's remains were recovered. During a search of Ingrid's home, the police found Mariners game tickets on her laptop, dated April 8th. It was inferred that Ingrid and John had attended the game scheduled for 7:10 p.m. on April 11th. John was brought in for questioning following his arrest. During the interrogation, he admitted to knowing Ingrid and revealed that they had been dating for approximately a month after meeting online. He stated that he typically spent the night at her residence, but on that particular night, he did not, as her children were due to return the following day. He recounted that they went to a bar following the Mariners game before driving back to her residence in her car. He admitted to having little recollection of events thereafter, attributing it to being heavily intoxicated. John mentioned they engaged in sexual activity that night and remembered Ingrid's peculiar behavior, but beyond that, his memory was hazy. When questioned about his actions afterward, he claimed uncertainty, but speculated that he likely slept on a downtown Seattle sidewalk, waking up there the next morning. He surmised that Ingrid had driven him to the city center of Seattle before departing. John expressed to authorities that he was not of sound mind, struggling with alcohol dependency, and currently without a permanent residence. John underwent a physical examination, and his injuries were documented through photographs. Scratches were observed on his left hand and forehead, while cuts were present on his mouth and chin, along with scrapes on his chest. His ex-girlfriend informed authorities that she had encountered him on April 9th, noting a swollen and injured lip. Despite claiming he was robbed, he still had his wallet. On April 20th, the police found Ingrid's vehicle in Belltown, just outside of Seattle. However, John's account contradicted the evidence. When they searched the car, the authorities found garbage bags identical to the ones containing the body parts. Additionally, 3 fingerprints lifted from the driver's door handle were sent for testing, and the results matched those of John Charlton. John Charlton was arrested by the authorities on suspicion of committing first-degree murder against Ingrid, as well as stealing her vehicle. The case against John heavily depended on circumstantial evidence. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty. During his defense, John's legal team argued the lack of physical evidence connecting him to Ingrid's murder. Initially, John denied any knowledge of Ingrid's fate that night, but later changed his plea to guilty before the trial. Based on the evidence presented during court proceedings, the prosecution contended that John strangled Ingrid to death within her residence before dismembering her body in her bathtub using a pruning saw. Following the dismemberment, John purportedly disposed of Ingrid's remains across various locations in Seattle. Ingrid's death was officially classified as a homicide by the medical examiner. During the investigation of her residence, authorities found an almost empty package of plastic bags similar to those in which her body parts were discovered across Seattle. Ingrid's bathroom yielded a 15-inch pruning saw suspected to have been used in the dismemberment process. Upon inspecting the area beneath the bathtub, police uncovered human remains. John Charlton received the maximum sentence permitted under the state's sentencing guidelines, which amounted to a prison term of just over 27 years. However, Judge Julie Spector of the King County Superior Court conveyed her wish to impose a life sentence, if possible, underscoring the brutal and cruel nature of John's actions. Beyond anyone's belief, during his sentencing, John addressed the court and Ingrid's family, expressing his remorse with the words, "I'm truly sorry." Prior to the charges related to homicide, John had a history of criminal convictions, including aggravated robbery, felony theft, grand theft auto, fourth-degree assault, and third-degree theft. Additionally, he was arrested for burglary. John's past was marked by turmoil. In 2006, his parents, Rye and Joanne Charlton, expressed concerns for their safety due to their son's drunken behavior. This prompted them to obtain a temporary protection order against him. John disclosed to them that he was feeling overwhelmed by life's pressures and experiencing psychological instability. Court records indicate that on March 2, 2006, John was intoxicated and aggressive, attempting to provoke a confrontation with his parents. Reports suggest that he was found intoxicated and behaving aggressively towards them in their residence, posing a physical and verbal threat. During this period, Rye recalled an incident where John forced his wife to watch the movie Hannibal, which he had retrieved from a shelf, warning her to watch this and be cautious. Court documents also revealed John's parents' concerns about his potential crack cocaine use, along with their observation that he holds grudges for years and becomes frustrated and intimidating when under the influence of alcohol or drugs, causing fear of violence. It was upon the request of John's parents that the petition for the protection order was eventually withdrawn. Friends of Ingrid speculate that she ventured into online dating because, as a single parent juggling 2 young daughters and a demanding full-time nursing job, it seemed like a convenient way to meet someone amidst her hectic routine. Ingrid's untimely death left a profound void in the lives of her loved ones, whose grief knows no bounds. Their pain is a testament to the irreparable loss of a cherished mother, daughter, and friend. In the aftermath, the community rallied around Ingrid's family, offering support and solidarity in their time of need. Their resilience in the face of tragedy is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Though Ingrid's life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. May her story serve as a cautionary tale, inspiring us to prioritize safety and vigilance in the digital age. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Leng. Snapper Point is an Australian conservation area situated near Fraser Park Beach, close to Catherine Hill Bay, New South Wales. The area surrounding Cape Snapper Point draws adventurous tourists who climb it in search of remarkable photographs, as it comprises entirely of steep, irregular volcanic rocks. On April 24, 2016, at 10:30 a.m., a group of hikers walking at the foot of the promontory noticed a large object floating on the surface of the water. They reported the discovery to law enforcement, and the police arrived at the scene and removed an unidentified package. After examining the findings on shore, they discovered the body of an unknown woman with multiple injuries, suggesting that the victim had been subjected to a brutal assault. She was not identified, but news reports described her as an Asian female between 20 and 30 years old, of average height. 5 years earlier, a major airport in the northern Sichuan province of the People's Republic of China saw off 20-year-old Leng during a torrential downpour. The girl tearfully said goodbye to her beloved mother after the death of her father in 2008. Her mother became the closest person to her. Leng flew from her native China to the distant country of Australia, where she had dreamed of studying since her childhood. 11 hours later, the plane landed in Sydney. It was the first time Leng had made such a long journey alone, but she was determined to achieve her dream, so she easily overcame any difficulties. She was met at the airport by her own aunt and her son, who was only 2 years younger than Leng. The oldest and most populous state in Australia is New South Wales, where 1 in 3 Australians live. It was here that Leng's early years were spent after moving here. Since coming to Australia, Leng has lived happily with her 48-year-old aunt, her young husband, Derek Barrett, and her cousin in their camping house. The girl had a private room where she spent almost all of her free time. Leng loved to read and draw, so she would spend hours in her room pursuing her favorite hobbies. For the convenience of living in another country, Leng changed her name to Michelle. Michelle Leng enrolled at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she successfully studied economics and hospitality management. Michelle was very intelligent and motivated. She was not afraid of anything new and easily made new acquaintances. Like many girls of her age, she often posted photos on social networks, where she drank cocktails with friends, as well as pictures of her extreme adventures to dangerous natural places. Michelle was an adventurous person who could easily travel to Hobart for a vacation and regularly took day trips around New South Wales. In recent weeks, she posted videos from West Head Lookout near Sydney Harbour, photos from Resolute Beach north of the city, from Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, and from Jervis Bay on the south coast. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she fearlessly photographed herself on the edge of a cliff and posted this striking photo to her Instagram account. Michelle excelled in her studies, made new friends, and found a part-time job. Desiring to organize her personal life, Michelle communicated regularly with men on dating sites and went on trial dates. The woman led an active and busy life, attending classes during the day and then rushing to work on her weekends. She made sure to meet friends and visit unusual places. On April 21, 2016, Michelle met up with a friend at the mall. They had lunch together, did some shopping, and then Michelle boarded a train at the train station. She got off at Central Station around 4:30 in the afternoon and was never seen again. 2 days later, Derek went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. Aunt Michelle asked Derek about his niece, and he said he had not seen her in 2 days. Derek Barrett had been unemployed for a long time, so he often stayed up late at the computer and woke up only in the afternoon, so it was obvious that he might not have seen Michelle. But the situation was such that nobody had seen Michelle since April 22nd, and her phone was switched off. Having called all of Michelle's acquaintances and friends, the aunt became even more worried. She inspected the girl's room, but it was in perfect order, as usual. After going through the girl's laptop, the family concluded that Michelle had not returned from her date, and perhaps something had happened to her. Her absence was quite unusual, as she was in regular contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. The next day, Michelle's aunt and her husband Derek went to the police station and filed a missing persons report. They also reported Michelle Leng's disappearance to the Chinese embassy on April 24, 2016. The body of an unidentified woman, wrapped in a plastic bag, was discovered by a group of tourists at Snapper Point. While Michelle's relatives in China and Australia were searching for her, local news channels reported the finding of the woman's body. A compiled sketch of the victim made it clear that it was Michelle. It took the police 3 days to identify her after they made a sketch of her. From that point on, Michelle Leng was officially listed as a missing person, and an investigation was launched. After interviewing Michelle's close relatives who were living with her, the initial theory was that she had been attacked by an unknown person with whom she had planned to meet that day. CCTV footage tracked the girl's movements on the day she went missing, but the surveillance cameras and footage from a short train journey showed that Michelle was alone. According to her friends, she had no plans to meet anyone that day and was in a rush to get home. Reviewing social networks and correspondence of the girl did not confirm the presence of a young man with whom she could have met. The version about a secret stranger who could have committed the crime was not confirmed. The results of the forensic examination confirmed that Michelle's body had sustained multiple injuries, and she had most likely tried to fight off her attacker, resulting in multiple stab wounds. Police Chief Inspector Gary Jubelin said the interpretation of the situation is that Michelle was brutally assaulted before her death, but she was spotted on her way home and did not go out anywhere else, so the perpetrator must have attacked her in that area. The inspector also noted that most likely the perpetrator had deliberately chosen a very secluded area of such a beautiful place, as the body was found in an area frequented by tourists and fishermen, but the place was somewhat isolated. Forensic analysis indicated that Michelle Leng's body had been in the water for no more than 48 hours, and likely much less, suggesting the body had been dumped quite recently. The Chief Inspector of Police stated that although the location where the body was found was distant from the national park entrance, there was a parking lot near the tourist attraction, implying the body may have been transported there by car. Homicide detectives studied CCTV and traffic camera footage to determine Michelle Leng's last known movements. They continued to contact her family members, friends, and co-workers to gather additional information. In addition to the search efforts, interviews were conducted with relatives and acquaintances in the hope of reconstructing a detailed picture of the event and establishing a full understanding of the relationships within the family where Michelle lived. Police Inspector Gary Jubelin stated with certainty that based on the gathered information, Michelle was a very responsible person who always kept in touch with her family and informed them of her whereabouts. Therefore, there were serious concerns when she suddenly disappeared. However, for 2 days, her family either did not notice she was missing or chose to ignore it. Police called Derek Barrett in for questioning as the last person to see Michelle alive. Investigators were skeptical of his accounts of nightlife and long daytime naps, so he was re-interviewed. The investigators began asking questions about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to remember the last time he had seen her. Unable to withstand the pressure of the interrogation, Derek refused to answer the question and demanded a lawyer. Such strange and uncertain behavior led to a number of doubts, and Derek was arrested as a suspect. However, the arrest had grounds, as on the eve of the interrogation, investigators checked his cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was found on April 24th. Additionally, when police obtained surveillance footage from a parking lot, it captured a car matching the description of Derek Barrett's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th, leaving no doubt that he was there. Derek denied and claimed to the last that it was just a coincidence and the car was not his, but the footage was clear enough to prove his presence in the parking lot. Police have charged a 27-year-old man in the death of 25-year-old Michelle Leng. Her naked body, with multiple stab wounds, was found in a blowhole on the Central Coast, New South Wales. The news of the arrest and charge against Derek has left Michelle's entire family in shock. Police spoke to Michelle's mother, who was devastated by the news of her daughter's death. She rushed to Sydney to see the site of her only daughter's dream and death, but the woman was still unable to comprehend her daughter's passing. Derek Barrett, age 27, who was married to Michelle Leng's aunt, was charged with the 25-year-old student's murder. This occurred after the police released CCTV footage that captured her last shopping trip in the central business district of Sydney on April 21st, as well as her journey back home. The footage shows her shopping at a mall on Pitt Street before boarding a train at St. James Station to travel to Erskine Park, located in the southwest of Sydney. The police believe that Michelle returned to her family home in Erskine Park in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin, and was presumably murdered there. The autopsy revealed that Michelle tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed several times in defense, stabbing her more than 30 times in total. CCTV footage is believed to have captured a vehicle entering Lake Munmora National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th, and police claim Michelle Leng's body was inside the vehicle. Despite Derek Barrett being detained and charged, the investigation continued, and gradually other details of Michelle Leng's final moments surfaced. Based on these, further charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a hidden camera, and murder. The investigation revealed that the suspect had an abnormal sexual interest in his wife's young niece. When Derek Barrett's cell phone was seized and handed over to experts for analysis and recovery of previously deleted data, the files found on the phone left no doubt that he was not only involved in Michelle's death, but also had an unhealthy interest in her. It turned out that Derek had installed a hidden camera in the shared bathroom, hidden behind toiletry items, and regularly reviewed the recordings. The phone also contained images taken just before Michelle's death. Following these images, it became clear that Michelle had returned home on April 21st around 5 p.m., and around midnight, she sent her last text message from her phone, after which she could not be contacted. Late at night, Derek Barrett began to execute his malicious plan. He entered Michelle's room again while she was asleep to carry out his customary pattern of assault and gratification, but the girl woke up and Derek attacked her. He bound her and covered her mouth with duct tape to keep her silent. The deviant kept her tied to the bed for 2 days and intermittently abused her, as evident from the photographs on his phone. Investigators found Michelle bound, naked, and with a look of horror on her face, lying on the bed. However, in these photos, Michelle did not yet have the injuries that led to her death. Derek's last picture of her was taken around 8 a.m. on April 23rd, and at that time, Michelle was still alive. During the day of April 23rd, Derek's stepson Derek came home twice and did not hear any sounds from Michelle. Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras showed that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash. Presumably by this time, Michelle was already dead. Derek had showered and washed off any traces of blood, and then thoroughly cleaned the house, hiding evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. On April 24th at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped at a gas station where he bought drinks and filled his car with gasoline. That's where he was caught on CCTV cameras. Upon arriving at Snapper Point, he disposed of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, Derek visited his parents, who noticed nothing unusual in his behavior, and then returned home to await his wife's return with absolute equanimity. He repeatedly claimed that he had not seen Michelle and that the girl had not returned home, and cynically accompanied his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held. Barrett's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told the local court that Barrett was pleading not guilty and that he was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. Michelle Leng's friends and family were present in the packed courtroom, but Derek Barrett did not need to attend in person. He appeared later via video link. The fact is that the day before, the defendant reported that he did not remember much in the hours before he killed Michelle Leng because he had taken illegal drugs. He also told the court that he had only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle Leng's body off the cliff. Before attending the court hearing, Derek Barrett was examined by a psychologist. However, forensic psychologist Dr. Richard First disputed the defendant's claims of memory loss. He testified and found Derek Barrett mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs the suspect was taking did not cause memory loss, and that all of his actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were clear and purposeful. Respected forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First also stated that Derek Barrett's intelligence, concentration, and memory were within the normal range. He did not believe Barrett's claims of memory loss, and said the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses or acting on emotions. The psychologist also rejected Derek Barrett's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim. Dr. Richard First also told the court that the accused feigned amnesia to reduce his responsibility for the crime, after he claimed he could not remember the period when he apprehended and killed Michelle Leng. Speaking at the trial, Derek Barrett attempted to justify his crime by claiming he was addicted to illegal drugs. However, this assertion was refuted by Dr. Richard First, who pointed out that Derek's claim was self-contradictory, as it was evident that the suspect had gained weight during that time period. Judge Wilson stated that in his 30-year career as a criminal defense attorney, he had never encountered an obese, substance-dependent individual. Regrettably, there was nothing genuine about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom. In Sydney, Derek Barrett's demeanor in court gave the impression of a psychopath. His crime was not the result of a drunken night, poor life choices, or childhood abuse. In August, at a retrial hearing, Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Leng, as well as twice sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of Michelle Leng shortly before her death. Barrett said he could not remember the 48-hour period during which he killed the girl, including cleaning up the crime scene and dumping her body, because he was under the influence of illegal substances. He said his only memories were of an argument, blood in the bathroom, and the terrified face of his niece screaming at him. However, Judge Wilson said she did not believe Derek Barrett was telling the truth about his memory loss, nor did she believe he was truly sorry for what he had done. The Leng family consoled each other while Derek Barrett wiped away tears, telling them, "I deserve to live. This should never have happened." Passing sentence, Judge Helen Wilson condemned Derek Barrett's actions as depraved and sadistic, committed by a person in a position of trust. The judge detailed Barrett's disturbing fantasies and actions in court, making it clear that he had failed to fool anyone. Although the events were deeply etched in his mind, Barrett claimed they were merely vague memories. During the court sessions, Barrett showed no emotion and repeatedly spoke the victim's name. Chief Inspector Gary Jubilin of the NSW Police Homicide Unit stated that the crime was horrific and senseless, and while justice was served, there was no joy in such a case. Judge Wilson sentenced 28-year-old Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison, with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett displayed no emotional reaction when sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Zhang, expressed gratitude to the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during her time of immense grief. She also thanked the NSWAT police, including Detective Inspector Jubilin, for their investigation into her daughter's death. A fund has been established to cover the costs of Miss Leng's funeral and to provide support for her mother when she returns to China. However, Michelle Leng's tragic story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, an unexpected event occurred. A woman visiting her elderly, dementia-affected mother found an unknown USB device in the mother's hands. Upon examination, the device contained disturbing videos and photos of Michelle Leng's abuse shortly before her murder. The police were able to match the photos to those that Derek Barrett had deleted from his phone in an attempt to conceal his crimes. In 2020, Barrett was charged with additional sex offenses based on this new evidence. Prosecutor Hugh Baker told the court that the elderly woman had no connection to Barrett, and there was no explanation for how the USB drive ended up in her possession. The horrifying and depraved secret, discovered by chance, led to Barrett receiving additional years of punishment to his already lengthy sentence. Friends and acquaintances commemorated Michelle Leng on Chinese and Australian social media. This tragic story underscores the need to address the underlying factors that can contribute to such crimes, such as idleness, lack of purpose, and indifference. Cherishing life and being mindful of each day is crucial, as we can never predict which day will be our last. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha Josephson. In the heart of Columbia, South Carolina, amidst the energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a dark and tragic turn. Her story gripped the nation and shed light on the potential dangers that can exist in the most routine aspects of our lives. Samantha was a shining presence on the University of South Carolina campus. Tragically, a routine night out led to a series of events that would profoundly impact the lives of those who knew her. Samantha Lee Josephson was born to her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. As a student, she attended the University of South Carolina, where she majored in political science. Samantha, who was a senior in college, planned on graduating in 2019 and attending Drexel University School of Law, where she wanted to study to become an international law specialist. Samantha had earned full and partial scholarships to Drexel University and Rutgers, respectively, and aspired to practice international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority. She studied abroad in Barcelona and visited Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Samantha was described as amazingly beautiful with a wonderful smile. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg, and the couple was very close, staying in constant contact through texting and calling. They had plans to start a future together, even when Samantha was going to be attending law school. Greg was going to move in with her and support her. Everything seemed to be going well until Friday, March 29, 2019, when she never returned to her apartment, and things took a turn for the worse for Samantha. On the evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha planned to go out with her roommate and some friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Her boyfriend, Greg, was supposed to join them as well, but he was back in his hometown at the time. Still, he told her to go out and have fun without him. Samantha was feeling gloomy after hearing about a family member's illness, and what she needed was to distract herself a bit, and going out with friends was the perfect opportunity to lift her spirits. The group met up and went to a few different bars before finally settling at a bar known as the Bird Dog Bar, which was located in an area called 5 Points, a popular spot for students to hang out. Even though Samantha was enjoying herself with her friends, she continuously texted her boyfriend, Greg, pleading with him to make a 2-hour drive to visit her in Colombia because she needed emotional support. The couple had already made plans to see each other the following weekend, so her boyfriend never changed his mind and decided to stay where he was, but he still kept in constant communication with her. At around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to return to her apartment alone. She called an Uber, a popular ride-sharing service, using a mobile app, as this was a common practice among her and her peers. On that occasion, fate would lead her into the hands of a murderer. While Samantha waited for the Uber, she had one last phone conversation with Greg at around 2:04 a.m. Samantha told him she was going home and had taken an Uber. This was a routine she had followed many times before, using Uber to get to and from the bars, as the distance was too far to walk. A few minutes after placing the request with an Uber, a car pulled up to the curb where Samantha and a group of other weary bar customers were waiting for lifts. Security cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize that the driver was there for someone else. After doing an about-face, she is seen retreating to her spot on the sidewalk. Samantha was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala, driven by a man who was later identified as Nathaniel David Rowland, pulled up into the space in front of her. Samantha said goodbye to Greg, and she opened the door and exchanged a quick word with the person behind the wheel before climbing into the back seat. Once she was inside the car, it sped off away. Within a short time, the Uber that Samantha had ordered arrived at the designated pickup location. From that point in time, no one other than the 21-year-old political science major student and the man driving the Impala knew that she had gotten into the wrong car. The CCTV footage would later show that the black Chevrolet Impala circled the area numerous times before targeting Samantha. Anyone who has ever spent time in 5 Points was aware that college students gathered in the streets after the bars closed to wait for their rides, and watching him drive around the area suggested that he knew exactly what he was doing that night. Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, used the Find My Friends app on her phone to track her movements and ensure she got home safely that night. However, he noticed that she was traveling in the opposite direction from her apartment. At first, he thought she might be going to a friend's house, but when he later texted her to check if she was okay, he received no response. He then tried calling her, but she did not answer her phone. Greg tried texting Samantha several more times, but noticed that his messages were delivered but not read, indicating that she never read any of them. Later, her phone location stopped sharing, which shocked Greg, as it had never happened before. Greg later thought that Samantha might have misplaced her phone in the Uber, but still decided to call her friends and roommate to find out if they had heard from her, or if she had made it home. Unfortunately, nobody had heard from her or seen her. Greg hoped she would turn up in the morning and tried to get some sleep. The following day in the morning, Samantha was not present. Her roommates were worried about her location and reported her as missing. Her boyfriend Greg also drove for 2 hours from Colombia to help search for her. A little over 3 to 4 hours after the missing person report was filed, the dead body of a young woman, later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson, was found by a group of turkey hunters in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles away from 5 Points. Less than 24 hours after she was last seen on surveillance video getting into a black car. Shocked by the gruesome discovery, the hunters immediately called 911, and representatives from the local sheriff's office were promptly dispatched to the scene. After an autopsy was performed, it became clear that Samantha was the victim of a violent attack. Her body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries to her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet. It was also determined that her fingernails were hacked to pieces as she tried to shield herself from the razor-sharp tool used to attack her. The evidence suggests that she was stabbed with a double-bladed knife and then dragged to the woods. The autopsy revealed the extent of her blood loss, as her body only contained 20 milliliters of blood, compared to the typical 4 in the human body. Investigators were dumbfounded by the sheer brutality of the crime. The investigation revealed that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the wrong car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber driver she had called was seen arriving shortly after, but when he found she was not there, he cancelled the trip and left. It is likely that the car she was in was not the Uber, as she was murdered soon after. Investigators believe the driver used the child-proof locks to trap her inside, as the doors could only be opened from the outside. The description of the car, a black Chevrolet Impala, was quickly released to the public in the hopes of finding the perpetrator before he struck again. Fortunately, the car was spotted by officers on routine patrol a few days later, and the driver, Nathaniel Rowland, was arrested after a short chase. A search of Rowland's car revealed a child's car seat, surrounded by what seemed to be bloodstains. There were also large quantities of blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk. Samantha's cell phone was also found in the car, and it was discovered that Rowland had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Rowland continuously denied any knowledge of Samantha's kidnapping and murder. A physical examination revealed traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails, but none of his DNA was found on her. Detectives speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack, and the activated child-proof locks in the car suggest that Rowland trapped her inside as soon as she got in, leaving her helpless as he stabbed her repeatedly with a double-bladed knife. She was caught unawares by the ferocious attack and had to put a lot of effort into trying to defend herself, which would account for the multiple stab wounds found on her hands, as well as the condition of her mangled fingernails. Considering the excessive force that was used against her, it's understandable that Samantha was not able to scratch her attacker, which would have left his skin cells under her nails after the dreadful act was done. Rowland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, where only a local would have known it existed, and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. After arriving back home, Rowland spent much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had happened, since he lived there nearly all of his life, and his residence was only minutes away from where the remains were found. That was two more strong pieces of evidence that pointed fingers to him as the killer. A peek into Rowland's background revealed that he was a devout churchgoer who had attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although there are no records of him graduating. It's unclear what he was doing for employment at the time. Rowland had one past felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under false pretenses. There was also a woman who was carjacked by two men, one of them being Rowland. They assaulted her and forced her to drive to an ATM where they took her money. They then forced her to drive home, where they robbed her of even more of her belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Rowland was never convicted of robbing the woman, but he did sell some of her stolen belongings, including the PlayStation 4. When detectives obtained a search warrant for the apartment of his girlfriend, named Maria Howard, in New Zion, where he lived, they combed the trash bins behind the apartment and found a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Rowland that were heavily stained with Samantha's blood. The detectives also found a white sheet with blood on it, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a two-bladed knife that seemed to have blood on it. Tests would later confirm that the blood found on the two-bladed knife, as well as blood found on the sheets, in the car, and on the bleach wipes, was a match for Samantha Josephson. With the evidence against him mounting swiftly, Rowland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, the kidnapping, and the murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial would be grueling for the family, with Nathaniel Rowland pleading not guilty, claiming he was innocent, even with the mountain of evidence against him. When the trial began in the summer of 2021, Roland's defense team argued that their client was an innocent man, based largely on the fact that his DNA had not been found on his alleged victim. On the other hand, prosecutors countered the defendant's claims of innocence with the undeniable amount of evidence that was collected in the case, amid the proof they put forward, which included the CCTV footage showing his car picking Samantha up in 5 points and driving away, the quarts of her blood that were found in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations that he tried to use her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, cell phone trackers that placed their devices in the same place at the time of the murder, and the fact that he lived near where her remains were discovered. A handwriting expert was also brought in to compare Roland's handwriting to a list that was written on a piece of paper found in his home, on which it was written, duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches. The expert testified that it was most likely that Roland wrote the list, which sounded as if it was a plan for the dreadful act. The prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including someone who witnessed Roland cleaning the weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend, who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Roland's car following the murder. Roland did not call any witnesses, and none of his family members testified on his behalf, yet he continued to assert his innocence and pleaded with the judge. The jury reached a guilty verdict in just 1 hour, and Nathaniel Roland was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the wake of Samantha's murder, her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, took it upon themselves to ensure that no one else suffered the same fate as their beloved daughter. To achieve this, they started the What's My Name Foundation, which encourages people of all ages to ask rideshare drivers to identify them by name before entering a stranger's vehicle. The Josephsons also advocated for a safety protocol they call SAMI, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. Additionally, in the aftermath of Samantha's tragedy, the rideshare industry implemented measures to protect both drivers and passengers, such as the issuance of a personalized 4-digit code that riders could use to confirm through the app that they were getting into the correct car. Samantha Lee Josephson's untimely death sent shockwaves through the hearts of her family and friends. The pain they bear is immeasurable, a testament to the bright light that Samantha was in their lives. Her story is a stark reminder that tragedy can strike unexpectedly. May her memory inspire us to be vigilant, look out for one another, and work collectively toward creating a world where safety and compassion prevail. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Georgia Williams. Shropshire, England, witnessed a tragic tale of a vibrant young woman, Georgia Williams, whose promising life was cruelly cut short, leaving a profound impact on the community. Georgia Williams was born on September 17, 1995, in Telford, Shropshire, England. Growing up in a tight-knit family with her parents, Lynette and Steve Williams, alongside her older sister Scarlett, Georgia's upbringing was filled with love and support from a young age. Georgia exhibited a compassionate nature, always eager to lend a helping hand and ensure the happiness of those around her. However, this admirable quality would eventually become a vulnerability. Despite facing bullying during her middle school years, Georgia's transition to high school marked a significant turning point. She found herself embraced by a circle of friends, becoming a popular and beloved figure within the school community. Her compassionate nature and leadership skills were evident as she ascended to the role of head girl, alongside her academic pursuits. Georgia pursued her passion for service by training as an air cadet, nurturing dreams of serving as an RAF paramedic in the future. Upon reaching 17 years old, Georgia secured a position at a local petrol station, where she quickly established rapport with her colleagues. Among them was Jamie Reynolds, a 22-year-old man who seemed withdrawn and disconnected from the group. Moved by her compassionate nature, Georgia extended a hand of friendship to Jamie, determined to help alleviate his sense of isolation through her efforts. Jamie gradually integrated into the social circle of their workplace, participating in group activities and forging connections with his colleagues. As time passed, Jamie found himself developing affection for Georgia, recognizing her as the only person who had shown him kindness and believed in his potential. Filled with hope, he began to consider the possibility that Georgia might reciprocate his feelings. Encouraged by this belief, Jamie gathered the courage to express his sentiments to Georgia, conveying his desire to pursue a romantic relationship with her, even envisioning the prospect of becoming her boyfriend. However, Georgia, aware of Jamie's emotions, politely declined his romantic advances. She conveyed her reluctance to engage in a romantic relationship and emphasized her commitment to preserving their friendship. Despite his disappointment over Georgia's lack of romantic interest, Jamie appeared to accept her decision and made efforts to maintain their friendship. Yet, beneath the surface, a concerning obsession and ominous fantasy began to take hold within him. During a shift together at the petrol station, Jamie confided in Georgia about his dissatisfaction with his current situation, expressing a desire to leave his job at the petrol station and pursue his passion. Jamie hinted that he was interested in forging a career aligned with his interests, and he was eager for Georgia's support. Eager to assist, Georgia engaged him in a conversation to explore his hobbies and passions, and she learned about Jamie's interest in photography. Georgia seized the opportunity to encourage him to pursue it as a potential career path. Enthusiastic about the idea, Jamie requested Georgia's assistance in creating a professional portfolio and proposed that she be his first model. Honoring her commitment to their friendship, Georgia agreed to assist, and together they scheduled a photo shoot for Sunday, May 26, 2013. The arrangement involved Georgia and a few mutual friends gathering at Jamie's parental home for the photo shoot. As Sunday approached, Georgia found herself torn between conflicting commitments, with her family hosting a barbecue and her long-unseen grandparents attending. Georgia contemplated canceling the photo shoot at the last minute. However, mindful of Jamie's reliance on her and unwilling to disappoint him, Georgia ultimately resolved to honor her commitment. Assuring her family that she would only be a brief 5-minute drive away from Jamie's residence, Georgia planned to swiftly capture a few photographs before rejoining her family. In doing so, she aimed to fulfill her obligations to both her friend and her family, ensuring that neither party would be let down. On that specific day, Georgia quickly got ready, styling her hair and applying makeup before putting on jeans and a leather jacket as she left home at 7:30 p.m. Her father complimented her, remarking on her beauty and comparing her appearance to Sandy from the movie Grease. With her family expecting her to return promptly, Georgia set out on her journey. However, as the hours passed without her arrival, concern began to grow among her loved ones. Initially, her mother dismissed the delay, assuming Georgia had become absorbed in the photo shoot or socializing with friends. Sending a text to inquire about the conclusion of the photo shoot, her mother received a response from Georgia, indicating that the photo shoot had ended some time ago and that she was spending time with friends, implying she might return home late. Unperturbed by the exchange, Georgia's mother interpreted the text as routine, observing the customary trio of kissy face emojis that often punctuated her daughter's messages. Given Georgia's responsible character, her mother harbored no suspicions of any trouble. As the night passed, Georgia's parents went to bed, expecting her to return home by morning. However, when they woke up the next day, their concern grew as Georgia was still absent. At 6:30 a.m., her mother texted her, asking for an explanation for her prolonged absence. It wasn't until 7:30 a.m. that a response came, stating that Georgia had stayed at a friend's house and her phone's battery was running low. She assured her mother that if she didn't respond further, it was because her phone was about to shut down. Unbeknownst to Georgia's mother, these messages were not written by her daughter, raising concerns as the situation became increasingly ominous. On May 27th, Georgia's parents expected her to return home after a music festival. However, when she did not arrive, they assumed she had gone directly to the festival from her friend's house. Nevertheless, they expected her back the next morning, as she had been eagerly anticipating her first driving lesson scheduled for that day. As the night wore on without Georgia's return, her parents grew increasingly anxious, waiting up late into the night. With no sign of her, panic set in, and they reached out to relatives and friends, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Yet, despite their efforts, no one had seen or heard from Georgia in days, deepening their concern and uncertainty. When Georgia failed to arrive and drive home the following morning for her eagerly anticipated driving lesson, her family took immediate action, reporting her disappearance to the police. Desperate for answers, they provided authorities with all the information they could gather. However, their knowledge was limited to Georgia's attendance at a photo shoot at Jamie Reynolds' residence, with no further details about her whereabouts or companions after that point. In response, the police launched an investigation, focusing their attention on Jamie Reynolds. What they uncovered about him was deeply unsettling, revealing disturbing details that raised further concerns about Georgia's safety. In 2008, Jamie had been involved in an incident where he attempted to strangle a teenage girl. Despite the seriousness of the situation, law enforcement opted for a cautionary approach, issuing Jamie a warning and allowing him to avoid facing charges. However, when authorities stumbled upon this troubling episode in Jamie's past, their suspicions intensified, with Jamie emerging as the prime suspect in Georgia Williams' disappearance. Police wasted no time in paying him a visit, arriving at his residence. Encountering silence upon knocking on the door, they resorted to forced entry, combing through the premises but finding no trace of Jamie. Thus, a frenzied manhunt ensued as authorities intensified their efforts to track down the elusive suspect. After thorough inquiries at the petrol station, it became evident that none of their co-workers had encountered Jamie or Georgia. Their absence from their shifts raised significant alarms, as they had deviated from their usual routine. Although Jamie's parents were unreachable due to their vacation, they provided authorities with crucial information regarding the registration of Jamie's van. Had with this vital lead, police across Shropshire promptly disseminated alerts to law enforcement agencies nationwide, urging them to be on high alert for Jamie's van. Before long, the authorities tracked down Jamie in Glasgow, Scotland, a staggering 200 miles from his home. His sudden departure from the country sent shockwaves, which served as a glaring indicator of suspicious behavior. On May 30th, the Glasgow police apprehended Jamie Reynolds at a modest hotel. Acting on suspicions of kidnapping, they took him into custody without delay, and he faced immediate interrogation regarding Georgia's whereabouts. However, Jamie maintained ignorance of her location, offering no helpful insights to the investigators. Subsequently, he was escorted back to Shropshire for further questioning, as Georgia's loved ones anxiously awaited updates. They received disheartening news regarding the investigation's progress. The grim outlook devastated the family, amplifying their anguish, with Jamie now detained as the primary suspect. Law enforcement seized the opportunity to search his residence thoroughly for any pertinent evidence. During the search, authorities stumbled upon a camera containing an SD card. However, their hopes of uncovering vital clues were dashed when they discovered that all files had been systematically deleted, leaving investigators to grapple with another frustrating setback. The camera underwent forensic examination at the police station, where experts diligently worked to retrieve the deleted files. Upon successful recovery, the retrieved data delivered a chilling conclusion to the investigation. Among the recovered files were several images captured on the day of the photo shoot, offering a haunting glimpse into Georgia's final moments. The initial photographs depicted Georgia in seemingly ordinary poses, at the outset of the photo shoot, confirming her presence at Jamie's residence that fateful day. Despite her outward appearance of contentment and compliance, it was evident that Georgia remained unaware of the sinister intentions lurking beneath Jamie's facade. Tragically, she unwittingly walked into a perilous situation, unaware of the impending danger that ultimately befell her. As the authorities sifted through the images, the tone grew increasingly grim and unsettling. Subsequent photographs revealed a harrowing sequence of events, portraying a distraught Georgia stripped of her clothes, standing atop a red recycling bin, her hand seemingly bound behind her with a hanging rope ominously overhead. Tragically, the footage captured Jamie Reynolds' heinous act as he callously filmed Georgia's final moments, depicting her futile struggle for breath. Shockingly, he proceeded to engage in despicable acts of necrophilia, violating her lifeless body in various rooms of the house, including his parents' bed, to compound the horror. Jamie documented his depravity with hundreds of additional photographs, showcasing Georgia in degrading positions. He callously stripped her of her jewelry, preserving them as grotesque trophies of his heinous crime. The police relentlessly scoured Jamie's residence, unearthing a staggering collection of 16,800 graphic photographs and 72 distressing videos. These explicit materials depicted unimaginable acts of violence, including sexual assault and snuff films showcasing torture and murder. Shockingly, it became apparent that Jamie himself was actively engaged in the creation of his snuff film, a chilling revelation. In an admission, he confessed to deriving pleasure from acts of strangulation. Alarmed by their son's dark fascination, Jamie's parents abruptly cut short their vacation to meet with the authorities. During their conversation, they disclosed that Jamie had been exposed to this disturbing brand of ultra-violent pornography since he was just 14 years old. It is possible that his exposure to such content could have occurred even earlier. Though their intervention came about when they discovered his activities, they were unable to confiscate his laptop since he required it for school. They reached out to the internet provider and arranged for access to certain websites to be blocked. Nevertheless, at the age of 14, he independently contacted the internet provider and secured his own private Wi-Fi by making the payment, ensuring that his parents remained unaware of his continued access to these websites. When his parents initially discovered him viewing these videos, they grew alarmed and informed the police and Child Protective Services. However, they were informed that no action could be taken, as viewing such content was not deemed illegal. During the investigation, law enforcement discovered a collection of notepads containing 40 distinct narratives penned by Jamie. These stories revolved around the themes of inflicting harm, sexual assault, and the killing of women. Additionally, it was uncovered that Jamie had scoured social media platforms, printing and marking images of young girls with nooses around their necks. Among the narratives was one titled, "Georgia Williams in Surprise," mirroring the tragic events that befell Georgia. Authorities suspect that this particular narrative may have been a premeditated plan conceived from the outset to be actualized. Jamie initiated the writing process in January, completing it a mere 3 weeks before the murder occurred. Jamie stubbornly withheld any information regarding the whereabouts of Georgia's body, vehemently maintaining his innocence. Faced with his refusal to cooperate, investigators embarked on a painstaking journey to retrace Jamie's movements from the Monday morning following Georgia's murder. Their investigative trail commenced at the petrol station where surveillance footage captured Jamie refueling his vehicle, unaware that Georgia's lifeless body lay concealed in the back of his van. Following the fuel stop, Jamie embarked on a journey spanning 60 miles, eventually arriving at a movie theater. Remarkably, he callously abandoned Georgia's remains in the van parked within the theater's lot, before proceeding inside to indulge in a film screening. In a disturbing turn of events, Jamie's actions at the movie theater represented his twisted attempt to fulfill his desire to take Georgia out on a date, albeit in a macabre and horrifying manner. However, law enforcement lost track of Jamie following his departure from the theater, prompting authorities to issue a public appeal for information regarding his whereabouts. Fortunately, this appeal yielded results, with individuals coming forward to report sightings of Jamie's van in the vicinity of the New York-Georgia mountain pass near Exham. This area, abundant with dense woodland and treacherously muddy terrain, served as the backdrop for Jamie's attempt to evade capture. Recollections of Jamie and his van were vivid among locals, particularly due to an incident where his vehicle became mired in mud. Good Samaritans had intervened to help extricate it from the muck. Acting on this crucial tip, law enforcement ventured into the wooded area where Jamie had been spotted. Tragically, it was in this secluded setting that they made the grim discovery of George's unclothed body. Following the recovery, George's remains were transported back to Shropshire. A subsequent post-mortem examination revealed that Georgia had succumbed to asphyxiation, likely resulting from pressure applied to her neck by a ligature. Additionally, forensic analysis uncovered bruising on her back, indicative of Jamie having forcefully pressed her downward using his knee, exacerbating her helplessness and suffering. Despite steadfastly maintaining his innocence and denying any involvement in her murder, Jamie's stance took a dramatic shift on the inaugural day of the trial in December 2013. Without warning, he opted to rise and plead guilty to all charges leveled against him. In a poignant moment, George's father addressed the court, articulating the enduring anguish he and his wife bore from the haunting image of their daughter's lifeless body, lying in the solemn confines of the hospital's chapel of rest, an indelible scar etched upon their souls for eternity. Throughout the trial, revelations surfaced regarding Jamie's prior brushes with the law. In 2008, he had attracted police attention, receiving what the judge deemed a final warning, following an unsettling incident involving the confinement of another one-year-old girl in his residence, a harrowing precursor to the tragedy that befell Georgia in 2011. He found himself under scrutiny once more, after an incident where he recklessly reversed his car into that of a girl who rebuffed his romantic advances. Although the case was eventually closed, the judge, Mr. Justice Wilkie, did not mince words, labeling Jamie a sexual deviant and expressing grave concerns about his potential to escalate and become a dangerous serial offender. Consequently, Jamie was handed a whole life term, a sentence reserved for the most heinous of crimes, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars without the possibility of parole. This marked Jamie as the 46th individual to receive such a sentence, setting a grim record as the youngest in history to be condemned to a whole life term. Justice Will's remarks during sentencing painted a chilling portrait of the events, underscoring the profound anguish inflicted upon Georgia. He emphasized the torturous nature of her ordeal, highlighting Jamie's twisted fixation with violent and sadistic pornography, culminating in a grotesque display of power over his victim as she faced a harrowing demise. Jamie Reynolds bowed his head in shame as Georgia's grief-stricken parents and sister listened to the harrowing details of her tragic demise and the horrors she endured at his hands. The courtroom was filled with unbearable tension as the jury was confronted with the gruesome images depicting Georgia's final moments, prompting her devastated family to flee in anguish. In 2014, Reynolds sought to appeal his whole life sentence, but was met with defeat. The following year, a serious case review castigated police officers, children's services personnel, and mental health professionals for their handling of Reynolds before the murder. The review highlighted systemic failures in interagency collaboration when Reynolds had previously come to law enforcement's attention 5 years earlier, following an incident where he attempted to strangle another girl at his residence. Georgia's parents expressed profound sorrow upon reading the report, lamenting the missed opportunities to intervene and prevent their daughter's tragic fate, stating, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making. George's death could have been prevented. Outside the courtroom, Mr. Williams expressed the family's profound grief, stating, "There is no sentence that we can ever say we're satisfied with, because it'll never bring Georgia back. She's dead, she's gone physically, and lives in our hearts." He emphasized the irreparable loss they experienced and lamented that regardless of the length of Reynolds' prison term, he still retained the one precious gift he had denied their daughter: life. Jamie Reynolds continues to serve his sentence in prison to this day. Georgia's mother, Lynette, has since penned their journey of grief in her book, Our Georgia, which delves into the family's profound sense of betrayal stemming from the failures that allowed Reynolds, with his disturbing fixation on snuff movies, to roam free and ultimately commit murder. Described as a powerful and moving memoir, the book serves as both a tribute to Georgia's memory and a poignant exploration of the aftermath of her tragic death. Georgia's tragic passing inflicted irreparable wounds upon those who cherished her, leaving behind an unfathomable void. Her absence stands as a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of treasuring each precious moment with our loved ones. In the wake of her loss, the community united in solidarity, offering unwavering support to Georgia's grieving family and friends, providing a source of solace during their dark. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Foster family. To what many perceived as the perfect family, no one expected that everything would quickly descend into disaster. On August 26, 2008, around 4 a.m., the Shropshire Central Fire Control received an emergency call about a fire at the Osbaston Mansion residence. When the firefighters arrived, they were hindered by a large horsebox that blocked the entrance. By the time they managed to enter the residence, due to the initial difficulties, the fire had already consumed everything, including the owners, the Foster family. During the investigations, the police discovered that the horse trailer blocking the entrance had been deliberately parked there to delay the firefighters. This was not just an accident. Something more sinister was behind it. The question arose, who harbored animosity towards this beloved family, and who could be responsible for their tragic demise? The disturbing footage recovered by the investigators from the security cameras provided the answers they sought, but also sent chills down their spines. This is the shocking case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster, who was destined for success, was described by his mother Enid as a proactive achiever who sought opportunities for financial gain from a very young age. He shared aspirations with his younger brother Andrew Foster of emulating their late father, who was a sales director, as they both wanted to be successful businessmen. However, despite their common goal, Chris and Andrew's relationship had always been strained since childhood. Andrew later revealed the difficulties in their bond, attributing it to childhood dynamics. Chris, who was perceived as more confident and self-assured, cast a shadow over his quieter and less assertive brother Andrew. Both siblings, however, maintained a close relationship with their mother Enid, who cherished them both, though harboring a special fondness for Chris. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife who later gave birth to their daughter and only child, Kirsty, in 1993. Chris's journey to wealth and success in the late 1980s began when he worked as a salesman, selling mattresses and cheap pizza boxes for insulation. However, his life took a transformative turn when he witnessed a news report, leading him to establish a prosperous engineering company. This venture ultimately propelled him to self-made millionaire status, thanks to the development of a groundbreaking insulation material that would be widely utilized in the oil industry. As a result of what he saw on the news, the Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, which resulted in a devastating fire lasting for days and claiming 167 lives. Chris astutely seized this tragedy as an opportunity, identifying a market for fire-protected insulation tailored to gas and oil rigs. Although several oil companies expressed interest, they demanded proof of the product's efficacy before committing to any contracts. To meet this requirement, Chris took a significant financial risk by mortgaging his house for £5,000 to fund a testing. The successful test, where Ulva Shield, as he named it, displayed exceptional resilience compared to other oil rig insulations that burst into flames, and even earned a rare A1 fire test rate. Major oil corporations promptly placed orders, catapulting Christopher Foster into millionaire status almost overnight. Reports circulated that he was accumulating a substantial amount of money, which he did not know how to manage. As his business expanded, Christopher experienced a significant increase in annual turnover, soaring from £50,000 to £1 million, according to his personal assistant. It appeared that Chris was destined to spend a large sum of money. Although he allocated himself a monthly salary of £10,000, he was known to withdraw an additional £5,000 from the company's accounts for personal expenses. By 2004, Chris's net worth was reported to be £10 million. During that same year, after a shopping trip, Chris and his wife Jill had returned home when Jill came across an exquisite mansion called Osbaston House while browsing through the pages of Shropshire Life magazine. This property, situated in the affluent village of Mabrook in Shropshire, England, covered an area of 16 acres and featured a private lake and riding paddocks. Despite the asking price of around £1.5 million, the Fosters promptly made an offer and quickly sold their own home to move to Osbaston House. After settling in, Chris invested an additional £50,000 in installing a swimming pool and landscaping the property. He then indulged in a lavish lifestyle, acquiring various expensive vehicles, including Porsches, an Aston Martin, and Range Rovers. Their daughter, Kirsty, was enrolled in an exclusive private boarding school, and Chris also bought her several horses. Additionally, Chris purchased 4 dogs and several doves, and hired a housekeeper and a personal assistant. The house was adorned with over £200,000 worth of antique furnishings, which became Chris's most expensive hobby. Chris was an avid gun enthusiast, owning numerous high-priced firearms ranging from £12,000 to £12,500, or almost $20,000 at the time. He frequently participated in extended shooting parties, sometimes lasting up to 3 days, which resulted in bills as high as £8,000. Chris also had a habit of leaving his guns scattered around his residence, and would occasionally shoot doves, much to his wife Jill's dismay, as it caused a mess on his cars. In one disturbing incident, Chris took Kirsty's black Labrador, which was bothering the sheep, to a country lane and shot the dog in the head. Despite being a thriving entrepreneur, Chris was characterized as impulsive by acquaintances, exhibiting a desire for instant gratification and swiftly severing ties with those who displeased or went against him. He derived satisfaction from others admiring him and coveting his material wealth, and over time, both Chris and Jill ascended to higher social circles. Unbeknownst to those in his circle, Chris was significantly exceeding his financial limits and compensating by withdrawing funds from the business. His excessive spending resulted in a financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris signed an exclusive contract with a company called DRC, granting them sole rights to produce the oil rig sealant he had invented. By 2004, his net worth had risen to £1 million, but a year later, in 2005, he found himself burdened with £2.8 million in debt. Instead of implementing cost-cutting measures, Chris, consumed by his spending addiction, tried to address the issue by seeking additional funds from alternative sources. He proceeded to sign a second contract with another company for the sale of his product, breaching the exclusivity agreement with DRC. This led to legal action, with DRC ultimately suing Chris and acquiring his patent, which they then made a global success. Chris faced bankruptcy, and in 2007, his company went into liquidation, with £3 million worth of his assets frozen and his salary ceased. Despite being in dire straits, Chris persisted in carrying on as if nothing significant was happening, and he even found himself in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. He failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and other taxes. To address the growing tax obligations, he resorted to borrowing from banks in an attempt to alleviate the financial strain. Furthermore, he remortgaged the Osbaston house 3 times and overdrew from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his outwardly lavish lifestyle and continuous spending, Chris managed to conceal the fact that he was deeply in debt. Over the following 12 months, he continued his hobby of clay pigeon shooting and maintained his use of extravagant cars. People who knew Jill were uncertain whether she was aware of the full extent of her husband's financial troubles, or if he had shielded her from the harsh reality. However, she did not show any signs of reducing her spending, and she did not share any concerns with her friends. Chris found himself grappling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was slipping away, and fearing the imminent loss of everything. During a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris emphatically stated that he would never part with Osbaston House unless it was in a body bag. He expressed a solemn commitment to safeguarding his family, vowing to take his own life rather than endure the loss of his loved ones or possessions. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his lavish lifestyle, and aware that time and money were running out, Chris sought professional help on multiple occasions. He confided in his doctor, expressing feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants, but his doctor did not take his concerns about ending his life seriously. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, something unthinkable would happen in the week leading up to the August bank holiday weekend of 2008. Chris stumbled upon a letter from his best friends attached to the front gate. The letter conveyed the unsettling news that his friends intended to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. When the housekeeper showed him the letter, Chris appeared perplexed but remained silent. This letter would become the catalyst for the tragic events that unfolded later. The nightmare Chris had been evading was now becoming a harsh reality. Struggling with financial problems, he was on the verge of losing all his material possessions, and this impending ordeal was set to be known by everyone, something that he didn't really want. The thought of Kirsty and Jill, Chris's wife and daughter, losing their accustomed lifestyle proved unbearable for Christopher. Kirsty faced parting with her cherished horses, and the family had to face the likelihood of returning to their hometown of Wolverhampton, bidding farewell to their luxurious way of life. For a man of Chris's pride, such a situation would be deeply humiliating. On August 21st, 2008, a friend reached out to Chris via text, inquiring about his well-being, to which he responded, "Not good. Things are coming to a head for me soon." This communication was the only insight the friend received, unaware of the underlying financial troubles Chris was grappling with. On August 25th, 2008, Chris received an invitation to attend a barbecue and pigeon shooting event. The 50-year-old man, accompanied by his 49-year-old wife and their 15-year-old daughter, then proceeded to join the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of distress in Chris or the other 2 family members. Witnesses recall Chris appearing his usual cheerful self, and even in the photo captured during the event, the family exuded happiness, oblivious to what Chris had planned for later that night. In the previous week, Chris had closely examined suicide-related websites online, and had spent the same afternoon reflecting on old family photographs that depicted happier times. Expressing his wish to leave the party, Chris informed his wife that he had had enough for the night. Although Jill preferred to stay a bit longer, they eventually departed around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just minutes later at 8:44 p.m., with their final moments as a family recorded by the home security footage. Shortly after Jill retired to bed at 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed as she continued texting a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, compelling Kirsty to conclude her conversation with her friend and retire for the night at 3 a.m. Chris set out to kill his first victim using a silenced gun. He entered the room where his sleeping wife lay unsuspecting and shot her in the back of the head. He then went to Kirsty's room and killed her in a similar manner. The home security cameras captured Chris as he took one of his shotguns and went outside to the dog kennels, where he shot each dog in the head. Chris then made his way to the barn housing the horses and repeated the same sinister act. Following this, he set the barn ablaze with all the animals inside. In the footage, Chris appeared methodical and almost robotic, lacking any expression or sign of remorse. To hinder the firefighters' access to the residence and their efforts to extinguish the fire on time, Chris took action. He drove a horsebox and positioned it in front of the main entrance, shooting the tires to deliberately puncture them and make it harder to move. Subsequently, he strategically placed hose pipes connected to his domestic oil tank, pumping 200 liters of oil into the house's cellar. With his expertise in fire, Chris knew exactly what was needed to completely destroy the Osbaston house. His mental state seemed rooted in a desire for vengeance. If he couldn't retain his material possessions, then no one else should either. Chris then proceeded to set the house on fire, dousing his cars and other belongings with the flammable liquid as well. The fire quickly and violently consumed everything. Still armed with a rifle, Chris returned to the house and headed to the bedroom where Jill's lifeless body lay. There, he lay down beside her, embracing his deceased wife amid the flames that consumed everything. Chris's distant brother, Andrew, speculated that Chris might have wished for the fire to consume him as punishment for his actions that night. It was reported that Chris died due to smoke inhalation. The autopsy found no evidence of gunshot wounds, even though he had a rifle near him. At around 4:11 a.m., the security cameras had stopped working. A concerned neighbor called emergency services after seeing the flames growing. Firefighters quickly arrived at the residence, but were delayed by a horsebox blocking the main gate. By the time they cleared the obstacle, the fire had already grown to an intensity that made it difficult to bring under control. As firefighters battled the raging blaze, neighbors watched in horror as the estate was consumed by flames, expressing deep concern for the now missing owners, the Fosters. In the subsequent days, newspapers and TV stations issued appeals to locate the family, but their efforts yielded no results given Chris's affluent status. Authorities initiated an investigation, initially suspecting a criminal abduction of the Foster family. At this point, however, neither the bodies nor the security camera footage had been discovered, and so many had speculated that this was what had happened to them. The arduous task of extinguishing the flames spanned 3 days. Finally, investigators cautiously entered the remnants of the house and discovered the intertwined remains of Jill and Christopher. Their bodies were bound together, laid on the bed in a room that had collapsed down to the living room area where they were eventually found. However, there was no trace of Kirsty, amidst hopeful speculation that she might have escaped, while others feared the possibility of her abduction. A few days later, heartbreak ensued as small fragments of Kirsty's remains were discovered amidst the debris. Investigators, employing delicate precision, used brushes to gather Kirsty's remains into a waiting hearse. The discovery of a piece of Kirsty's skull revealed that tragically she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, just like the fate that had befallen her mother. Upon recovering and scrutinizing the bodies, the police directed their suspicions toward Chris as the likely perpetrator of the crimes. Concurrently, an investigation into his financial affairs was initiated. The deeper they delved, the more revelations unfolded about a prosperous businessman who was in reality submerged in insurmountable debt. To everyone's surprise, Chris's accumulated debts had amounted to £4 million. As creditors sought to claim his assets, they discovered that Chris had meticulously ensured there was nothing left for them. With the retrieval of security footage, the police confirmed their suspicions. Chris had carried out the murders and his own demise, leaving no note or indication of what he was going through. Speculation arose about the dark motives behind such a brutal crime, with the prevailing theory positing that Chris, consumed by shame over losing his fortune, opted for the heinous act to evade admitting his failures. Others suggested it was the defiant act of a self-centered man who chose to obliterate everything before facing the prospect of loss. Enid struggled with the distressing news, as did everyone else, but she adamantly rejected the notion that Chris could be capable of such actions. She staunchly defended him and harbored considerable sympathy for him, believing that Chris committed the acts out of love for his family, aiming to protect them from losing everything. However, Chris's brother Andrew held a contrasting viewpoint. Having not spoken for 16 years, there were fleeting thoughts of reconciliation for the sake of their mother, but fear restrained Andrew from going to his brother's house. With apprehensive thoughts of encountering a potentially hostile situation, Andrew asserted that Chris bullied him during their childhood and had even allegedly sexually assaulted him. This tumultuous history led Andrew to maintain silence for the 16 years. According to him, Chris exhibited traits of a bully and control freak. In response to Andrew's 1999 letter, Chris replied with a note demanding a written apology, adding that Andrew would need to beg and scrape on bended knee to come to him and Jill. Andrew contended that Chris was unwilling to acknowledge his wrongdoings and instead harbored long-standing grudges. 4 months after the devastating tragedy on December 19, 2008, the funerals for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill took place at their local village church. The joint funeral was silent and respectful, attended only by a small gathering of intimate friends and family. Both were laid to rest in the same plot. Following the wishes of Jill's family, Chris had a separate funeral and was interred away from Kirsty and Jill. In the years subsequent to the tragedy at the Osbaston house, remnants of the scorched structures and the family's charred belongings, including Kirsty's cherished first aid book for her horses, and even a handwritten note outlining what the family had planned to eat during that week of the tragedy, still lingered on the site. The once dream home, now reduced to crumbling ruins, persisted until 2011, when all debris was cleared. The 16-acre estate was eventually purchased in 2014, with plans formulated for the construction of a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property was put up for sale in 2012, it remained unsold until 2014, after the price was said to have been reduced. While the motives behind Christopher Foster's shocking deeds may have stemmed from financial struggles and the societal pressure to uphold an affluent and successful facade, it definitely shouldn't have taken such a horrific turn. Tragically, rather than making prudent financial decisions initially or later, confiding in his loved ones about his financial woes, Chris chose a path of self-destruction with devastating consequences for all involved. As we reflect on this heartbreaking case, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short and the loved ones they left behind. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers, a beloved principal in Bakersfield, California, was informed that on Tuesday, July 8, 2003, his wife, children, and mother-in-law were tragically found murdered in their home. Despite the house being ransacked, nothing was taken, leading the police to rule out robbery and suspect intentional homicide. Vincent was cleared as he had a solid alibi, proving he was out of town during the incident. Subsequent investigations revealed a disturbing truth that shocked the entire community: the chilling case of Vincent Brothers. Born on May 30, 1962, in Beatport, Long Island, New York, Vincent was known for his charm, reliability, and hard work from a young age. He had also served in the Marine Reserves after graduating from Norfolk State University. Moving to California in the mid-80s for further studies, he eventually earned his master's degree. Vincent had a tumultuous past with relationships, despite rising quickly as a school administrator. He had 2 brief marriages that ended in separation. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, he had a daughter with his then-girlfriend. He filed a lawsuit to establish paternity and eventually gained custody and visitation rights. Initially ordered to pay $350 monthly for support, this amount was raised to $771 by 2003. In the same year, he faced legal consequences, receiving a 6-day jail sentence and probation for a misdemeanor charge of spousal abuse. In 1992, Vincent entered another marriage, which also ended abruptly after allegations of threats to kill and physical abuse by his second wife. She filed for divorce in 1996. Allegations have been made against Vincent, who was the vice principal at Emerson Middle School, for sexual misconduct towards a colleague. The woman reported instances of harassment, including an incident at his home where Vincent physically assaulted her and prevented her from contacting the authorities by taking her phone. She tried to report the incident to the police but felt discouraged as Vincent was a respected member of the community, which made her doubt if her report would be taken seriously. The harassment continued with inappropriate touching at the school's front counter, leading the woman to take a leave of absence due to the hostile work environment. As the intimidation escalated to threatening phone calls, the school district investigated the claims and warned Vincent about the possibility of career consequences if found true. Despite denying the accusations and having a clean disciplinary record, the school administration decided to transfer Vincent to another school after their investigation. Vincent worked at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California. He was well liked for his routine of walking students home safely after school. While at Fremont Elementary, he met Joni Harper, the campus security supervisor. They began dating and got married after their first child, Marquise, was born. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. Unfortunately, their marriage was annulled in September 2001 due to Vincent's infidelity. In 2003, Vincent and Joni secretly remarried, and 4 months later, their third-born child, Marshall, was born. However, Joni soon confided to friends that their marriage was facing issues once again. This time, she expressed fear that Vincent might try to harm her. Joni, a loving mother of 3, lived with her husband, her mother Ernestine Harper, and their children in Bakersfield, California. They were known in their community as a joyful and involved family, actively engaging in community events and maintaining amicable connections with others. Joni worked as a basketball official, while her mother was recognized for her advocacy as a civil rights activist. Outsiders perceived Vincent and Joni's marriage as solid, unaware of the tragic events that would unfold. Vincent had already moved out of the house in April, 3 months before the incident, due to frequent conflicts with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On Sunday, July 6, 2003, Joni, along with her 3 children, Marquise, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, and her mother, Ernestine Harper, attended a morning church service. After the service, they went for lunch at the Black Angus restaurant before returning home. Once home, they took a nap before planning to attend the evening church service. In a horrifying sequence of events, Joni and her children were in one bedroom, while her mother occupied another area of the house, when they were ruthlessly and fatally attacked. There were no apparent signs of forced entry, and the assailant breached the house and initiated the assault by firing 2 shots at Joni's head in her bedroom, followed by targeting Lindsay in the center of her back. Ernestine, likely alerted by the noise, moved towards the hallway to investigate, but she was fatally shot twice in the face. Collapsing in the hallway just outside her bedroom, returning to Joni's room, the attacker proceeded to shoot Marquez and delivered a final fatal shot to the baby's back. Each gunshot was strategically aimed to ensure fatal harm. The assailant, rather than immediately fleeing, went to the kitchen, retrieved a knife from the butcher block, and viciously stabbed Joni multiple times in the back. The assailant then tampered with the TV connections, but placed the TV carefully on the ground. Additionally, Joni's purse was emptied onto the laundry room floor, yet nothing valuable was taken, including money that was left untouched. It appeared the assailant aimed to mislead the authorities, creating the impression of a break-in and seeking to eliminate any potential witnesses. Afterward, the assailant covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. On July 8, 2003, Joni's closest friend, Kelsey Spann, grew concerned as she hadn't heard from Joni, her mother, or the children since they attended church that Sunday. Worried that something might have happened, Kelsey decided to visit Joni's home to check on them, using the key Joni had entrusted to her. Kelsey attempted to unlock the side door, but found it difficult to do so, as something was preventing it from opening. She proceeded to the back of the house and discovered an unlocked sliding glass door, which was an unusual occurrence. Upon entering, she made the grisly discovery of Joni, Ernestine, Marquise, Lindsay, and Marshall, all deceased. Acting swiftly, Kelsey contacted the authorities at 7 a.m., prompting their arrival at the horrifying scene where the 5 individuals had been brutally murdered. The peaceful ranch-style residence where Joni, her children, and mother resided sat in a tranquil corner lot within the neighborhood. Law enforcement concluded that the family was tragically killed on a Sunday afternoon following their return from church. Detectives assessed the situation, identifying Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries. They inferred that the assailant's actions indicated profound anger. The police expressed concern for Vincent's safety and discovered that he had traveled to Ohio. Detective Watts, one of the detectives, traveled to North Carolina as Vincent and his brother Melvin had gone there to visit their mother. Upon interacting with Vincent in North Carolina, the police found him in a traumatized state, deeply distressed, and unable to articulate coherent sentences, which did not offer much insight into the investigation. His demeanor did not align with that of a probable killer, especially considering he was on the opposite side of the country at the time of the murders. They initially excluded him as a suspect, and Vincent also provided receipts confirming purchases made on the days surrounding the tragedy, solidifying his absence from Bakersfield, California, where the horrific events unfolded. However, Detective Watts still had doubts. He noticed that Vincent never asked about how his wife and children died on July 11, 2003. Vincent Brothers returned to Los Angeles, but was notably absent from his family's memorial service. However, on July 16, 2003, he attended their funeral. As the police investigated further, they discovered that Vincent had moved out from his family's residence in April 2003 and was no longer living with them. His wife, Joni, had been planning a second divorce and intended to seek child support for their children. Authorities also uncovered Vincent's history of violence against women, leading to a closer scrutiny of his alibi. Further scrutiny revealed surveillance videos from store checkouts depicting Melvin, not Vincent, making purchases. Confronted with this evidence, Melvin disclosed that Vincent instructed him to visit various stores at specific times, using Vincent's name instead of his own. Police could not locate any witnesses who had seen Vincent during the tragic period. According to Melvin and the family, they had not encountered Vincent from the evening of July 4th to the evening of July 7th. Despite their efforts, authorities lacked direct evidence linking Vincent to the murders. Vincent Brothers had rented a Dodge Neon upon his arrival in Columbus, Ohio, and stayed at his brother's house. According to police speculations, Vincent allegedly flew to Columbus on July 2, 2003, under the pretense of visiting family. On July 4th, he purportedly traveled back from Ohio to Bakersfield, where the tragic incident occurred on the afternoon of Sunday, July 6, 2003. Afterward, he returned to Ohio, arriving late on Monday the 7th. law enforcement meticulously examined the Dodge, focusing on its radiator and air filters. The Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis, was enlisted for assistance, with Dr. Lynn Kimsey, an expert in bug identification, meticulously analyzing insects found in the car. Dr. Kimsey's examination unveiled over 100 insects, meticulously identified by species, notably some exclusive to the western region beyond the Rockies. Certain insects indicated that Vincent traveled at night. Through careful analysis, she charted a path indicating the car's westward journey from Ohio. Investigators tracked down the vehicle's previous 5 renters, confirming that none had driven the car to California or near the Rockies. In their scrutiny of evidence from the home, the police focused on photographic evidence and observed a latex glove tip among items discarded in the laundry room. Upon testing, the tip revealed a DNA match, identifying it as a 1 in 6 billion match to Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent planned to leave town. He had started selling his possessions and even listed his house for sale. Consequently, on April 30th, 2004, Vincent was arrested and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution theorized that Vincent's motive for the murders was financial, contending that he acted out of fear of potential child support payments due to Joni's impending divorce. They portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who would disappear for long periods and often respond violently when questioned, particularly towards his wife or girlfriend at the time. Numerous witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, were summoned by the prosecution. Kimsey testified that the insects discovered in the Dodge Neon were consistent with those typically found along Interstate 70 while traveling. Testimony further corroborated that the 5,424 miles driven from July 2nd to July 11th aligned with the presented evidence. However, when Melvin testified, he attempted to retract his previous statements, claiming that he had lied to the police regarding Vincent providing him with a credit card to use. The defense countered by presenting an expert in high-speed driving. The expert asserted the difficulty of maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour throughout the journey from Ohio to California. They contended that such a trip would have been impossible for Vincent to accomplish. Additionally, their own pathologists took the stand, testifying that the murders likely occurred as late as Monday morning on July 7, 2003. To support their case, the defense presented interrogation tapes intended to demonstrate that Melvin had been coerced by the police into altering his testimony. They also brought forth a witness to a car incident that Vincent claimed occurred on Sunday morning. In this incident, a boy on a bicycle collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. While this incident was not reported to the police due to a lack of damages or injuries, the prosecution diligently sought to verify the bike accident story. Detective Watts traveled back to Ohio and located Tamba Leby, a car dealer who flew to California to testify. Leby confirmed that he was driving during the bike accident and that the boy collided with his car while he was stationary at an intersection. The defense strategy involved presenting Vincent's other brother, Troy, as Vincent's alibi witness. Troy was intended to testify that he had flown in from New York and spent that Saturday and Sunday with Vincent, touring different state colleges in Ohio. Vincent had expressed interest in applying to these colleges to further his graduate studies. However, complications arose when, after lunch on the day Troy was scheduled to testify, he was nowhere to be seen. Consequently, Vincent himself took the stand, vehemently denying any extramarital affairs and adamantly refuting the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent frequently broke down in tears. The prosecution brought in Franklin School principal Carla Toya as a witness. She testified about her involvement with Vincent, dating back to the year his son was born in 1996, and their on and off relationship until 2002, when she ended it. Toya then confessed that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, contradicting Vincent's staunch denial of previous affairs. This revelation undermined Vincent's claims of fidelity. The prosecution posited that the crime had been meticulously premeditated, acquiring knowledge of the family's Sunday routine, granting the killer control and a window of opportunity. Exploiting this familiarity, the perpetrator waited until the family was asleep, using a copied key to gain entry through the sliding glass door and methodically execute each member of the family. On May 15, 2017, Vincent Brothers was found guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, making him eligible for the death penalty. After hearing testimony from 137 witnesses, the jury deliberated for nearly 2 days before reaching their decision. Following the verdict, Vincent was escorted from the courtroom and returned to Lero Detention Facility under strict security. On September 27, 2007, Judge Michael Bush of the Durr County Superior Court sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. He was detained at San Quentin State Prison in California, where he is still currently housed. During the sentencing hearing, family members were given the opportunity to deliver statements. Vincent's only surviving child, his firstborn Margaret Kern Brothers, announced her resignation from the brothers' family, expressing that upon leaving the courtroom, she would solely identify herself as Margaret Carr. The evidence suggested that Vincent Brothers lacked empathy and remorse for his actions, a common trait in what many call a psychopath. His perception of his children as mere objects indicated a complete detachment from any emotional connection with them. The act of stabbing Joni appeared to be a deliberate means of severing his ties with her on a physical level. His action of covering the victims seemed to indicate an attempt to shield himself from confronting the aftermath of his deeds, suggesting a deeply personal involvement in these killings. It is a tragic and unfortunate reality that the victims faced against this monstrous individual. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short, and the loved ones they left behind. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dawn Hatchney. December 26, 1997, during the early morning hours in East Bremerton, Washington, a neighbor noticed smoke coming from the Hatchney residence and alerted the other neighbors. It didn't take long before a 911 call was made, and authorities rushed to the scene. Authorities arrived and got the fire under control, only to then make a grueling discovery, accompanied by a smell of burning flesh that made them fear the worst. Inside, they unfortunately found the body of a 28-year-old woman, whom the neighbors immediately recognized as Dawn Hatchney. Her husband, Nick Hatchney, had gone for a hunting trip with friends, and around 10 a.m., he came back home with their dog, only to find the house had been on fire, and his wife had died as a result of it. Initially ruled as an accidental fire, a gruesome discovery years later would reveal something far more sinister behind it. This is the heartbreaking case of Dawn Hatchney. Dawn Marie Tahara was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington, to Donald Tahara and Diana Pearl. Donald worked in a shipyard, while Diana took care of the home. Dawn was their eldest child and only daughter, and she grew up with her 3 brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek, in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother, Dawn's devoutness began at an early age, with her embracing faith and accepting the Lord into her life when she was 4 years old. During her childhood, Dawn faced hardships due to her parents' struggles with anxiety and depression, which often led to frequent conflicts. Around 1980, Diana met a new man, prompting her departure from the family to move in with him. This led to the arrival of another baby. However, the relationship hit a snag, forcing Diana alongside her newborn to return to Donald and her other children. Despite these childhood obstacles, Dawn turned all her challenges into doing well in school, dedicating herself to achieving excellent grades. At just 12 years old, she had participated in the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an opportunity that not only led her to the White House, but also allowed her to meet the late former President Ronald Reagan. In 1988, Dawn graduated and achieved the honor of being the valedictorian at Bremerton Christian School before joining the Northwest College of the Assemblies of God in Seattle. During her college years, she met Nick Hatney, and an immediate connection blossomed between them. However, Dawn's friends grew concerned when she referred to Nick as the man of her life after just a few dates. They hoped their friend would find a partner capable of providing unwavering support and genuine affection, as they perceived Nick as overly assertive and excessively self-confident, qualities they believed did not align well with Dawn's personality. Nick's upbringing was similar to Dawn's in some ways. He was born and raised in Washington, but unlike her, he came from Paulsbo, a coastal city in the state. Nick also faced challenges within his family from a young age. His father, Dan, was deeply immersed in his work as a mechanic and remained distant when at home, neglecting family time and household responsibilities. Meanwhile, his mother, Sandra, juggled running a home daycare and providing foster care, leaving Nick feeling neglected. He confided in his friends, expressing a sense of being less favored than his siblings, and even the foster children, perceiving his mother's feelings toward him as a form of hatred. Struggling through his mother's prolonged bouts of depression and his emotionally distant father, Nick lacked the emotional support or connection he needed from his parents. Despite this isolation, Nick found solace and deepened his involvement in Christianity by seeking comfort in the Bible. While his faith bolstered his self-assurance during his adolescence, it occasionally distanced him from others due to his newfound confidence. Nick and Dawn first met at their shared college. Dawn's friends found it strange that she would show interest in Nick, given his contrasting traits. Over time, they noticed a change in Dawn. She had always displayed confidence through her extroverted nature, was self-sufficient and driven, striving to achieve new goals. However, in Nick's presence, she became timid, withdrawn, and indecisive, frequently deferring to Nick's choices, even if they conflicted with her preferences or made her uncomfortable. It seemed as though Nick had a negative influence on her, rather than bringing out her best self. Despite this, their love endured and their relationship persisted, eventually leading to an engagement after Nick proposed on Alki Beach in 1990. They solidified their commitment with marriage on April 20th, 1991, and subsequently moved to Bremerton. At that point, both had completed their degrees. Dawn secured a position as a parole officer, while Nick embarked on his role as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, situated across the bay from Seattle. Nick had aspired to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church, due to his bond with his former youth pastor, Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At that time, P.B. Smith remained with the church, having overseen its affairs since the late 1980s, but had now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig in guiding the congregation. P.B. Smith adopted a more amiable, yet conservative approach to church leadership, whereas Pastor Robert was known for his stringent and radical teachings. Throughout their marriage, Nick consistently made decisions without any opposition from Dawn. This was the case because both Nick and Dawn adhere to Christian fundamentalism, a community where the wife is expected to submit to her husband's authority, believing it aligns with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, this ideology was explicitly promoted and deemed acceptable. The church even practiced exorcisms on afflicted members, advocated for families to have as many children as deemed by God, and endorsed homeschooling for these children. Their teachings emphasized women's modesty and addressed uncomfortable inquiries about sex, with speaking out against these norms risking excommunication from the church, fostering a climate of silence among dissenters driven by fear of expulsion. Dawn and the congregation found themselves deeply involved in what many would consider a cult, with her husband Nick playing a crucial role in the hazardous practices. Nick had shifted his admiration towards Robert and sought direct mentorship under him, moving away from his initial close relationship with P.B. Smith. Dissatisfied with Smith's more relaxed approach, Nick felt he wasn't learning enough and disapproved of what he perceived as leniency, favoring the stringent and extreme methods of Pastor Robert. In contrast, Robert saw Nick as a way to accomplish his own agenda, removing Smith and assuming complete control as the senior pastor of the church by 1997. Don and Nick had frequently relocated and resided in properties they refurbished to sell, encountering various home-related issues. Dawn, on the other hand, yearned to establish a family and settle into a permanent residence. To address this, Nick found a fixer-upper in East Bremerton, intending for them to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the home purchase, renovations, and their house-flipping venture had pushed the couple into debt. Although their outward appearance portrayed a seemingly flawless relationship, with Dawn portrayed as the supportive wife accommodating Nick's desires, underlying issues existed far beyond anyone's perception. Dawn had jokingly requested to a friend about potentially living with her instead of returning to her parents, in case he and Nick ended their relationship. Meanwhile, Nick continued accumulating debt by regularly loaning money to fellow church members. He embarked on his ambitious venture of establishing a Christian youth camp, which predictably proved to be financially burdensome. However, fueled by his fervent desire, he fully committed to the project, even beginning to scout properties in Jefferson County, convinced that one of these would serve as the perfect location for the camp. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision, affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy, a woman in her 20s, had already faced significant hardships in her life. Her first boyfriend had passed away due to an unspecified illness, and her father had died in a construction accident. Additionally, her brother battled with addiction. Sandy was married to a man named Jimmy, and their financial situation had been strained for some time. They relied solely on Jimmy's income as a carpenter, with Sandy staying home to care for their children. Like Nick, Sandy struggled with reckless spending habits, often exceeding their means, resulting in frequent arguments between her and Jimmy. These disputes sometimes led Jimmy to express his frustration through yelling or by withdrawing himself from the situation and spending hours at the bar in an effort to address their marital conflicts. The couple sought assistance from the church and started attending marriage counseling sessions, which were led by Nick. At this time, Nick had been the church's marriage counselor for several years. Many congregation members had lodged complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling approach, expressing unease over his tendency to concentrate heavily on intimate inquiries, often disregarding other crucial issues. It seemed that the discussions primarily focused on matters of a sexual nature, overlooking other significant aspects. However, due to the trust they had and the continued affiliation of P.B. Smith with the church, members assumed that Nick's position would not have been entrusted to him if he lacked credibility. By the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert had successfully replaced Smith, assuming the role of senior pastor, a decision that was fully endorsed by the church board. Smith and his wife then departed for Africa to engage in missionary work. Jimmy's parents, who were active church members themselves, felt that Jimmy and Sandy's decision to seek church intervention was too hasty. They also questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns deepened when they noticed that Nick seemed to focus more on Sandy individually rather than on the couple as a unit. This heightened attention extended beyond the counseling sessions, with prolonged phone conversations and an excessive amount of time spent together, both at the church and even outside the church premises. Jimmy's parents considered the dynamic between Nick and Sandy as inappropriate, noting their extended interactions and increased closeness, which appeared to exceed the typical boundaries of a counselor-client relationship. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, had noticed Nick's conduct and had a private conversation with him, expressing concerns about his inappropriate behavior and advising him to focus on his own marriage. Following numerous complaints, Robert intervened, cautioning Sandy that her relationship with Nick was unacceptable and needed to end. Sandy, feeling a divine connection between herself and Nick, reacted angrily to Robert's counsel. She wrote him a letter expressing her discontent, stating that the judgment she felt from him made it difficult for her to believe that he accepted her gifts or had confidence in her ability to hear God and use it to help anyone. The relationship between Sandy and Nick was already having a negative impact on those around them. Don and Jimmy, along with Jimmy's children from his marriage to Sandy, felt hurt. In fact, one of their children confided in Jimmy, revealing that Nick and Sandy had mentioned Nick becoming their new father when Jimmy died. At the church, Dawn began confiding in her friends about her distress. She revealed her financial troubles and her earnest wish to have children, which her partner Nick strongly opposed. As 1997 was drawing to a close, Nick engaged in relationships with multiple women besides Sandy. He was observed having private conversations and prolonged phone calls with these women concurrently. Sandy's alleged visions became more intense, urging Nick to prioritize the establishment of his youth camp and to devote more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. Dawn, on the contrary, made numerous efforts to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even going to the lengths of attempting to lose some weight. Certain women within the congregation endeavored to console her, affirming that the issues between her and Nick were not a result of her actions, but rather stemmed from Nick himself being the core problem. Regrettably, her life hadn't unfolded as she had envisioned when she entered into marriage with him. Fast forward to Christmas, Dawn woke up feeling unwell. Despite being sick with a cold, she and Nick visited her family, spending the entire day together. Later in the evening, they went to P.B. Smith's residence, joining his family for some time. Plans were made for Nick to go hunting with Lindsay Smith's daughter and her friends the following morning on the 26th. Just before dawn, Nick met up with his companions at Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County for a hunting trip. After spending a few hours in the woods without firing a single shot, they decided to leave and headed to a local diner for breakfast around 9 a.m. While everyone was eating, Nick suddenly stood up, appearing concerned, and exclaimed that he and Dawn hadn't opened their Christmas presents. Around 9:30 a.m., Nick departed from the diner and returned home by 10 a.m., only to discover the tragic news of his wife's demise in a fire. Investigators revealed that the fire initially remained contained in the bedroom, sparked by a malfunctioning space heater. The blaze rapidly escalated due to the presence of newspapers and wrapping paper within the room, exacerbated by the multiple propane containers on the floor. Strangely, despite Nick informing his friends at the diner less than an hour earlier that they hadn't yet opened their Christmas gifts, he told the authorities that they had opened presents the previous night. He explained that due to Dawn feeling unwell, she went to bed without tidying up the wrapping paper. Additionally, Nick claimed to have received the propane tank as a Christmas gift. The couple had been relying on space heaters during the winter, while their home was under renovation. These older space heaters lacked the safety features found in modern versions, leading to frequent fires and fatalities. The police found no discrepancies in Nick's account, and as a respected local pastor, he was a trusted figure in the community. This left the law enforcement with no reason to suspect anything other than an accidental death for his wife. Concerned for their pastor's well-being, Nick's congregation sought ways to support him during what they believed was an extremely difficult time. Pastor Robert even proposed attempting to resurrect Dawn through prayer, but Nick declined, citing his wish to spare her from any potential suffering. This refusal surprised Robert, given Nick's previous willingness to participate in church activities, including the exorcisms they had attempted before. Mary Glass, Sandra's mother-in-law, immediately suspected Nick's involvement in Dawn's death, convinced it was not an accident. She urged her husband to approach the police, but this never happened. Within days, Dawn's death was officially deemed accidental, and the Bremerton police handed the case over to Nick's insurance company. Nick had already submitted a request to process Dawn's life insurance policy. Family and friends found it peculiar that Nick was dealing with the life insurance so quickly after Dawn's passing. However, considering the couple's substantial debt and Nick's aspirations for the youth camp, they rationalized his urgency for the money. Some church members found Nick's grieving unusual, but they refrained from expressing concerns, assuming everyone copes differently. The church community organized a celebration of life event serving as Dawn's funeral, where family and friends gathered to share stories and commemorate her life amid their sorrow. Nick remained composed throughout and delivered a 45-minute eulogy. Friends stumbled upon photos of Dawn tucked away, suggesting he wanted to discard them. Nick displayed a harsh and insensitive attitude not just towards church members, but also to neighbors and friends. Nick shockingly engaged in an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's own mother, under the pretense of mourning as a widower. Nick's behavior had become intolerable even for Pastor Robert, resulting in Nick being asked to depart from Christ Community Church. On April 10, 2001, Sandy met with the district attorney, who offered her immunity in exchange for testimony about a secret from December 26, 1997. Nick allegedly confessed to Sandy that morning, but their call was interrupted. Sandy later spoke with Nick again, but he only said, "It's done." Eventually, when Sandy confronted Nick, he confessed to administering a significant overdose of Benadryl to Dawn and suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. The tragic aspect is that Dawn remained partially conscious, witnessing her husband suffocating her through the plastic bag. After ensuring she was no longer alive, he strategically arranged old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, positioning them beneath her body, and placed the propane tanks near the bed. He arranged the heater in a way that it would start a fire, intending to destroy any evidence of a crime, and instead staged the incident as an accidental fire. Dawn's autopsy showed no soot or carbon monoxide, leading the pathologist to attribute her death to an accidental fire, overlooking evidence of carbon monoxide's impact on blood cells. Despite high Benadryl levels, they deemed it insufficient to cause respiratory failure, dismissing the possibility. Notably, the crime scene photos revealed newspapers beneath Dawn's body, an unsettling detail that largely went unnoticed. While a fire marshal raised suspicions and conversed with the police, the ultimate decision regarding the accidental nature of Dawn's death did not fall within his jurisdiction. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001, at a Kinko's parking lot, where he firmly denied any involvement in Dawn's death, attributing his arrest to the church's attempts at sabotage. Despite his claims that the church members could inflict significant harm, Nick faced first-degree murder charges, with bail set at $750,000. Sandy's narrative conveyed to investigators appeared unusual, adding to the frustration stemming from the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick as a suspect or making an arrest. Her reason for cooperating was equally frustrating, driven by anger over Nick's involvement with other women from the church and a sense of exploitation. Nick appeared before a judge and pleaded not guilty. He claimed that his church had cast a curse upon him, alleging that Pastor Robert exerted a malevolent influence beyond the comprehension of the police. Nick's trial began, leading to a change in the charges due to the prosecutor's doubts about the judge's inclination toward the death penalty initially sought. The charge of first-degree murder was amended to aggravated first-degree murder, carrying a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This change in charges was a result of the arson Nick had committed, which enabled the revised charge. Witnesses, including the women who had personal relationships with Nick and various church members who had received counseling from him, provided testimonies that revealed information about Nick's conduct to the jury. These accounts highlighted the substantial influence the church had over their lives, detailing their experiences of alleged visions and direct messages they believed were from God, which Nick took advantage of for the purposes of justification and manipulation. Smith's daughter testified, recounting how she was introduced to Nick through her father, and how Nick had groomed her during her teenage years, with their sexual relationship beginning shortly after Dawn's death and continuing until the daughter eventually moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, highlighting that Dawn's body contained crucial evidence about the events of that day. However, these important indicators were disregarded due to Nick's status as a pastor, despite the unusual lack of soot and carbon monoxide exposure for someone who was alive and breathing during a fire. The defense strongly contested these allegations, concentrating their efforts on portraying Sandy as the jealous, vengeful ex-partner who fabricated accusations upon discovering Nick's infidelity with multiple women. Nevertheless, on December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic demise, the jury deliberated for only a day before delivering a guilty verdict for aggravated first-degree murder against Nick. During the subsequent sentencing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the courtroom, which included Dawn's friends and family. He vehemently maintained his innocence while expressing remorse for his actions and sorrow over their loss, acknowledging that Dawn deserved better. Nick was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court led to a revision of his life sentence. The appeal argued that since Dawn had already died due to Nick suffocating her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder for death by arson did not align with her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick, therefore, did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, changing Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick has actively supported educational initiatives and co-founded the Environmental Advancement Reintegration Network. He initiated a waste management system employing worm composting and even delivered a TED Talk centered on sustainability. Unfortunately, it is indicated that he will become eligible for parole in 2025 and could potentially be released soon. Dawn has passed, but her memory lives on. Sadly, the life she chose with the person she believed was her true love did not turn out to be the reality she had hoped for. This ultimately led to a betrayal that resulted in her heartbreaking and untimely death. Our heartfelt prayers and thoughts go out to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Missy. In the quiet suburbs of Southern California, the disappearance and tragic death of Michelle Yvette Missy Avila deeply shook a close-knit community. Her story is one of friendship, betrayal, and a devastating loss that left an indelible mark on those who knew her. The vanishing of Missy Avila caused shockwaves in the community as friends, family, and law enforcement mobilized in a desperate search to find her. The quest to uncover the truth behind her disappearance would reveal a disturbing tale of betrayal among those she trusted. Missy was known for her bright smile and caring nature, a young woman with dreams of a promising future. As the details surrounding her disappearance emerged, the heartbreaking story of friendships turned sinister captivated the nation's attention. This is the story of Michelle Yvette Missy Avila, her whose life was tragically cut short. Missy was born on February 8, 1968, and grew up in Arleta, Los Angeles. She lived with her mother and 3 brothers and attended San Fernando High School with her 2 best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Missy and Karen had been best friends since they were 8 years old, but the girls started to drift apart once they entered high school. Missy was very beautiful and had very long hair, which she loved, and she was quite popular and well-liked by most of her peers. Karen and Laura began to feel envious of the attention Missy received from others, especially from boys. During Missy's sophomore year of high school, a rumor began to spread that claimed Missy had been engaging in sexual relationships with several boys, all of whom had girlfriends. This rumor prompted a group of girls to confront Missy outside of school and assault her severely. As soon as Missy got home, her parents pressed charges against the ringleader of the attack, Sonia Bon. Missy was expected to appear in court on October 8, 1985, to testify against Sonia, but she would sadly never get that opportunity. Earlier in September, Missy had a falling out with both Karen and Laura due to the same rumor that had been spread a year earlier, in which Missy was accused of having sexual relationships with her friends' boyfriends. This time, the two girls involved were her best friends, Karen and Laura. Missy began dating a boy named Randy earlier in their junior year, but their relationship only lasted around a month before Missy broke things off, as she couldn't stand his constant partying. Not long after, Karen and Randy started dating and moved in together. However, Randy still had feelings for Missy, and Karen saw him flirting with her. Missy turned Randy down and told him she wasn't interested in rekindling their relationship. Missy also tried to be a good friend by telling Karen she should consider ending the relationship with Randy and try to find a better boyfriend. This angered Karen, and she and Laura spread rumors again and decided to confront Missy at one of the parks in their neighborhood. Missy tried pleading with them, telling them she would never betray either of them like that, and that these were the same rumors that were spread the year prior. Eyewitnesses claimed that Karen was seen shouting at Missy, threatening her with a broken beer bottle, pushing her to the ground, and slapping her before she and Laura stormed off. This incident occurred 10 days before Missy's murder. Not long after that incident, Laura expressed regret and contacted Missy, and the two of them decided to put everything behind them and continue with their friendship. However, Karen was still avoiding Missy until October 1st, when she contacted Missy and sincerely apologized to her about everything that had escalated between them. This meant a lot to Missy, as she had started to miss her friends, and the trio made plans to hang out at Stonehurst Park later that same day. On October 1st, 1985, Missy told her mom that she made plans to hang out with her friends, and her mom gave her permission to go, but she had to be back home by 6 p.m. Missy went outside and waited for Laura to pick her up. After Laura picked her up, the girls drove around for a while before making their way to Stonehurst Park, where they parked the car and waited for Karen to show up. A few minutes passed, and Karen pulled into the parking lot with their other friend, Eva, in the passenger seat. That's when things took a turn for the worse for Missy. When Karen entered the parking lot, she parked extremely close to Laura's car, rolled down her window, and began yelling at Laura. Laura also rolled down her window and started yelling back at Karen. Missy and Eva just sat there, shocked, watching their friends shout abusive things at each other. Missy had no idea what they were arguing about. Suddenly, Karen backed up and sped out of the parking lot, and Laura followed her for 45 minutes. They drove recklessly north of the city and into the mountains, both girls driving with such extreme anger that Missy and Eva were begging the girls to calm down and pull the cars over. The girls drove right into a parking lot that led to a huge forest. Laura and Karen got out of their cars, confronted each other, and continued to fight. Missy got out of the car in an attempt to stop her friends from fighting. However, as soon as she left the car, Karen and Laura suddenly ceased their argument, turned their attention to Missy, and approached her aggressively. They got so close to Missy that she was unable to re-enter the car or move away from it. Karen then laughed at Missy and informed her that they were not actually fighting and had no animosity towards each other, but rather they were angry with Missy. They revealed that the entire situation was a ploy to lure Missy into the woods so that they could confront her and teach her a lesson. They then shouted at Missy and explained that they had spread the rumors because they knew for a fact that she had slept with their boyfriends, and they were not going to let her get away with it. Missy tried pleading with them, telling them again that she would never do anything like that she never slept with anyone, but they wouldn't listen. When Missy started to shut down, the girls grabbed her and pushed her away from the car and towards a trail that led into the forest. Given that Missy was quite petite compared to the other girls, being only 4 feet 10 and 95 pounds, while Karen was 5 feet 2 and over 200 pounds, and Laura was 5 feet 6 and 135 pounds, Missy was unable to defend herself against the constant pushes by the two girls as they forced her to walk further down the trail. Eva was in the car during the entire altercation. She finally got out of the car and started walking behind the group. Eva was not involved in anything the girls did in the forest, and she didn't even know why she was brought along in the first place. When the group was out of view from the parking lot and deep into the forest, Laura stopped and faced Missy, who was crying helplessly and scared, and punched her right in the face. As soon as Laura started punching her, Karen joined in, and within seconds, Missy was on the ground, being beaten, punched, and stomped on. When they stopped, Laura pulled out a knife, grabbed Missy by the hair, and started cutting off chunks of her hair. They did this intentionally because they knew how much Missy loved her beautiful long hair. Karen wanted to join in on the hair cutting, but since she didn't have a knife, she just started pulling out chunks with her hands while Eva stood there, watching it all happen. After they had finished that activity, they produced restraints, bound Missy's arms behind her back, and gagged her. Since there was a river around 10 feet away from their location, Laura walked into the stream, looked directly at Missy, began running her hands through the water, gave Missy a smirk, and started taunting her, asking her to come into the water with her. When Missy did not move, Karen seized her, forcefully stood her up, and shoved her towards the river, causing her to fall down the hill. Since her arms were restrained behind her back, her face slammed down onto the ground, and she rolled up to the river. Laura and Karen then grabbed her and dragged her into the water. That's when Eva hastily ran back up the trail to the cars. Upon arriving at the cars, Eva realized that both vehicles were locked and too far to fetch assistance. She reluctantly started walking back down the trail until she heard a terrifying scream. She stopped, turned around, and swiftly ran back to the cars, where she lay on the ground in a fetal position and waited for approximately an hour for the girls to return. Eventually, she saw Laura and Karen, who were dripping wet and smiling and laughing, but Missy was not with them. Laura and Karen were holding Missy's body in the water that was 8 inches deep. The scream that Eva heard happened when Missy was briefly able to get her head above the water, but then Karen grabbed her head and pushed it back into the water. When the girls realized that Missy was near death, they released her, ran to a large log, and dropped it on her head. The girls then left the forest, got into their cars with Eva, and went home. 4 hours later, Laura called Missy's mother, Irene Avila, claiming that she had dropped Missy off with 3 boys driving a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura said she returned to the location, but Missy and the boys had already left. On October 4th, 1985, Missy's body was found face down in a stream in Big Tuhanga Canyon in Angeles National Forest, 3 days later by a group of hikers. The police found that she had been forcibly drowned in 8 inches of water, and her waist-length hair had been cut off. A 4-foot log was found on top of her body, and cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls were found near where her body was discovered. The girls told Missy's parents and the detectives that Missy had gone off with 2 men in a blue Camaro before she disappeared, which made the random items around the crime scene seem more plausible. This false claim sent the detectives on a fruitless investigation for the non-existent men for 3 years. Irene later said she had no reason to suspect Karen or Laura were involved in her daughter's death because both of them attended Missy's funeral, and Laura sent the family a sympathy card with $20. Karen also moved in with Missy's family for a long time, outwardly showing support and trying to help catch the killers. all while closely monitoring the investigation and attempting to divert the investigators from her own involvement. Karen was intensely focused on the murder, frequently visiting Missy's grave, covering the walls of her room with pictures of Missy and newspaper articles about the crime, and repeatedly returning to the creek where Missy's body was discovered. At one point, she even told Irene that she had seen Missy's ghost. After 3 years, on July 26, 1988, Eva Chirumbolo, the other teenager who had taken the 45-minute drive into the mountains, finally came forward and told the police everything that had happened. She explained the rumors, the falling out, the anger, and the jealousy, as well as the details of the murder. Eva said she took so long to come forward because the other 2 girls had threatened to kill her if she ever revealed what she had seen. In March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The jurors were not convinced that the murder was planned, and they rejected the first-degree murder charge. Karen Severson was released from prison on December 9, 2011, after serving 21.5 years, and Laura Doyle was released from prison in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen Severson attempted to profit from her crime by writing a memoir about the murder and her prison life, but the book did not do well. She also made a deal for a movie to be made about it, but Avila's family sued her in 2015, seeking to take the profits from the sales. As a result, the state of California passed Missy's Law, requiring entities who are helping publish works made by criminals to contact the families of the victims about the said works. Missy's story has sparked conversations about the impact of bullying, the complexities of teenage relationships, and the importance of fostering a culture of empathy and kindness. Community initiatives and support networks have emerged to provide resources and support for those affected by similar experiences. As we remember Missy, we honor her memory by working to create a world where friendships are built on trust and compassion. Her legacy serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, kindness, and the opportunity to live a life free from harm. In the end, Michelle Yvette Missy Avila's legacy will be one of resilience and hope. May her memory inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those affected by betrayal, and work towards a future where understanding and empathy prevail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vashti Seacat. Brad Seacat was born on March 3, 1976, in Kingman, Kansas, to Janet Seacat and her husband, whose identity and background remain undisclosed due to a previous marriage. Janet had a son, Robert, from a prior marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Seacat family has a history of good law enforcement, leading to a strict and disciplined home environment. Although details about Brad's childhood are scarce, it is known that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was physically strong and athletic, which led him to participate in high school wrestling and bodybuilding. His efforts paid off as he excelled in inter-school tournaments, often taking first place and gaining recognition as a star wrestler and prominent figure in his school. At 16, Brad met Vashti Seacat at a major wrestling competition at the Kansas City Coliseum. Vashti was born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, to Julie Hostler and Clinton Forrest. She was the third of 4 children, with an older brother, Rich, and sister, Catherine, and a younger sister, Tyler. Vashti was a social person with many friends, but she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. However, this didn't hold her back from becoming a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team. She enjoyed watching the team win and attended every match, including the one where she met Brad. Brad was immediately smitten with Vashti and asked her out. Impressed by his confidence, she accepted, and they felt an instant connection at their first meeting. From that moment on, they were inseparable. After high school, Vashti attended a university, while he followed in his family's footsteps by enrolling in the police academy. As a result, they spent less time together, which caused Brad was starting to exhibit controlling and possessive behavior. Over time, Brad's growing jealousy became unbearable for Vashti, and she eventually ended the relationship. Although the breakup was not dramatic or traumatic, it marked the end of their romance. After graduating from the police academy, Brad joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, a short distance from Kingman. Despite his professional accomplishments, he couldn't shake off the feeling of emptiness. He still had strong feelings for Vashti, and his love for her lingered deep within him. Brad didn't abandon his dream of reuniting with Vashti, and as soon as the chance presented itself, he visited her. His words struck a chord with Vashti, who sensed his sincerity, possibly due to his devotion to faith or genuine affection. This led her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brad hastily approached Vashti's family to express his true intentions and request her hand in marriage. The Seacat family was thrilled to hear the news, convinced that their marriage would be a successful one. The wedding took place in 2004, after which Brad and Vashti settled in a neighborhood in Kingman. As they began building their new life, they befriended Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to backyard barbecues. Brad's unpleasant behavior causing problems due to his controlling personality. However, when Vashti became pregnant, their issues appeared to fade away. In 2006, they welcomed their first son, Brandon, and 2 years later, their second son, Bronson. Although Brad was a loving father, he sometimes had a rough way of interacting with the children, especially during playtime. He treated the children like adults and occasionally showed a more aggressive side. Brad's behavior was concerning. He once beat a prisoner by hitting his head against a concrete wall, causing a fractured skull and brain damage. The prisoner later died from his injuries. Brad was sued for using excessive force, but his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve, supported him, and the charges were eventually dropped. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing Brad of any wrongdoing. Brad showed no remorse for his actions and even admitted to his colleagues that he liked to use violence, especially against individuals he considered bad people. On a separate occasion, Brad and another officer restrained a defendant who became unruly and resisted being removed from the courtroom for contempt of the judge. This incident earned them recognition, and the police chief awarded both officers bronze medals for their actions. On the other hand, Vashti wants to pursue her career despite her love for her children. She searched for a job and succeeded with her efforts. She became the new Human Resources Director at Vito Communications Company. However, Brad seemed unhappy about her new role. He wants Vashti to focus only on family work and her children's education. As a result, he started complaining about Vashti spending too much time at the office. The number of arguments between Vashti and Brad increased significantly. Despite her best efforts to repair their marriage for the sake of their children, Vashti feels her efforts are in vain. She had a feeling that their situation would eventually end in disaster. To resolve the conflict, Vashti and Brad began attending sessions with social worker Connie Sodman. During her first sessions, Vashti expressed feelings of extreme loneliness and isolation, suggesting that couples therapy sessions might be their last hope to save their marriage. Every time Vashti mentioned the possibility of divorce, Brad became angry. For weeks, he repeatedly threatened to kill her if she left him, boasting that he could take her life without consequences because he was a police officer. He claimed he could make her murder look like a suicide, and even mentioned burning down their house to destroy the evidence. After the argument, Brad threatened her, saying that if Vashti pursued a divorce, he would prevent her from seeing their children, even taking them out of the country if necessary. At the same time, Brad left his police job and began working as a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashti continued to attend therapy sessions and made positive changes in her life, such as exercising regularly and eating healthier. A few months later, Vashti's social life began to flourish. She makes new connections at work and meets someone she is attracted to. However, she confided in her sister about her new relationship out of fear that Brad might find out and take revenge. Vashti openly shared with her colleagues about the various threats she received from her husband. Unbeknownst to her, Brad discovered her personal diary and brought it to his office, where he scanned and printed out many pages. He then spends his days researching topics including suicide, fire injuries, and the difference between murder and suicide. In the first week of April 2011, Vashti had her final counseling session with Connie to prepare for her divorce from Brad. Together, they created a safety plan for Vashti and their children. When Brad received his divorce papers on April 29th, he overreacted. After discovering the papers, Brad finds a projector in the pantry and uses it to enlarge a handwritten note from Vashti's diary. At the same time, he also wrote a farewell message to his children. What's amazing is that he also printed out documents on how to disguise a murder as a suicide. Additionally, Brad asked the maintenance staff how to properly destroy computer hard drives, and he used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained images that were unfavorable to him. Then he threw the rest in the trash. Later that day, Brad bought gas at a convenience store and put it in his truck. That evening, he asked Vashti if he could spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children and promised to leave the next morning. However, he also tries to persuade Vashti to reconsider the divorce and becomes increasingly threatening when she refuses to change her mind. Vashti and Brad had a disagreement that evening, which resulted in Vashti going to bed exhausted around 3:15 a.m. Meanwhile, Brad entered the bedroom with a gun and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake and watching TV thought she heard gunshots but felt it wasn't concerning enough. Brad then staged his suicide by placing the gun next to Vashti's body. He poured gasoline into the hallway and upstairs bedroom and took Vashti's phone to call himself, creating an alibi. After getting his children, Brendan and Bronson, to a safe location, Brad started a fire. The fire spread quickly, engulfing the main room and igniting the remaining cartridges in the gun. At 3:45 a.m., neighbors were startled awake by the fire. Shortly thereafter, at around 7 a.m., Brad called 911, reporting that his wife had taken her own life. When emergency responders arrived, the first floor of the house was on fire and Brad was waiting in the car with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was still in the house, and Brad said that only his wife was there. He fabricated a story that Vashti had shot herself out of depression, and before doing that, she asked him to take the children to a safe place. Brad claimed he tried to save Vashti but was unable to do so because of the intense smoke and fire. When firefighters finally extinguished the blaze, they discovered Vashti's body on the bed in the master bedroom. An important detail attracted the attention of investigators. A .44 caliber revolver was found below Vashti's body, the barrel pointed toward her feet, and a 5-gallon gasoline barrel lay middle of the bed. 2 days later, investigators found Vashti's diary in her car, which contained a handwritten note and a suicide note. Forensic examination revealed that Vashti died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head and also suffered gunshot wounds to the torso and thighs. However, blood and lung tests showed no signs of smoke or carbon monoxide inhalation, which is typically present in the body of a person killed in a fire. The extent of the burns on Vashti's body made it impossible to determine whether her death was a murder or suicide. Police discovered some inconsistencies in Brad's story. It is worth noting that there was no dirt, blood, or wound on his body. Additionally, the position of the gun with the barrel pointing downward raises suspicions that this was not a suicide. Special Agent David Fetty of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation questioned how the gun came to be under the body. He pointed out that if Vashti shot herself while lying down, the gun would fall to the floor. If she sat up, the gun would still be on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet does not support the theory that Vashti shot himself behind the right ear. David decides to investigate further when some details don't seem to add up. Police found documents explaining how to make a murder look like a suicide. While analyzing Vashti's diary entry, they noticed her handwriting did not match her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarr concluded that the note had been tampered with. Witnesses also reported seeing Brad destroy a computer hard drive the day before. A neighbor who heard the fatal gunshot testified that the incident occurred at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Brad called 911. This information confirms David's suspicions that something is wrong. Police arrested Brad on May 13, 2011 and charged him with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 other counts related to putting his sons, Brendan and Bronson, in danger. During interrogation, Brad claimed that Vashti felt insecure and depressed because of their troubled marriage and his threats to take the children away. Brad also claimed that after filing for divorce, Vashti was overcome with depression and remorse, so she set a fire and shot herself. However, the police did not believe his story. The trial began on June 10, 2013. Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley shared her account of the events with the jury, emphasizing that no one was more aware than the police of the devastation of fire and its destructive ability to erase evidence. Regarding the projector, the defendant claimed that he only used this device for practical training to guide students. A forensic examiner testified about a forged letter and the destruction of a hard drive. The defendant claimed that he destroyed the hard drive to protect personal information, not to hide anything. The defendant's attorney, Roger Falk, argued that Vashti had suffered from depression since high school, a condition that had worsened after taking some kind of sedative. Brad's brother testified in court, corroborating his brother's account that Vashti had been depressed and sad for weeks before her death. In contrast, therapist Can reported that although Vashti was initially depressed due to marital circumstances, it was not a clinical mental health problem. The therapist said Vashti has been very worried about her future lately. Vashti's brother also recounting the emotional turmoil Vashti's children had endured as a result of their parents' circumstances. The prosecution portrayed Brad as a manipulative person who used his police powers to distort the truth. Yet the defense repeatedly argued that Vashti's death was a suicide and pointed out that even the medical examiner could not determine the cause of her death. Brad testified in his own defense, describing himself as a loving husband and devoted father who was saddened by his wife's desire for a divorce. Kingman County Judge Larry Solomon was accused by Brad that the judge had an incentive to rule against him to win a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. However, the jury ultimately found Brad guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Solomon sentenced Brad to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and an additional 6 years for other crimes. Brad will not be eligible for parole until he has served more than 31 years. In handing down the sentence, the judge took into account Brad's not guilty plea, his dishonest attempt to avoid responsibility and his lack of remorse.